Chapter 853. Let me go. Who the hell are you? Let me go. You're illegally imprisoning me. It's a crime. Let me go. Through the glass, Zhang Tai could see that some medics were pressing down Dr. Frankie's hands and feet with difficulty. Of course, it was not because these medics couldn't control Dr. Frankie, but because they were afraid of hurting Dr. Frankie. Therefore, it was very difficult for them to suppress Dr. Frankie. This was already the third day after the first meeting of the expert group. Mr. Orphe's face was full of stubble, and he hadn't left the hospital during this period. His red eyes and dark circles made Mr. Orphe's image look terrible. Mr. Orphe, Dr. Frankie's memory regressed again, but his brain activity is more active than yesterday. The attending doctor looked at the report in his hand. Mr. Orphe said faintly, his memory should be when he was about 26 years old. The attending doctor was stunned, and then hurriedly flipped through the various reports in his hand. When he was about 26 years old? Mr. Orphe sighed. He just said that he would accompany me to watch Boz's championship match. This is the match he promised to take me to watch when I was 8 years old. It's a birthday present. In order to find out the cause of Dr. Franch's disease in more detail, Mr. Orphe had already revealed Dr. Franch's Alzheimer's disease. By various means, he had found the doctor who secretly treated Dr. Franch's disease and obtained Dr. Franch's medical records for the past 2 years. However, these records still couldn't explain Dr. Frankie's brain activity at this time. Because the brain crazily extracted nutrients from the body, Dr. Frankie woke up for a very short time each day, but every time he woke up, his memory regressed. He's getting younger and younger. When they thought of this, some of the doctors in the expert group could not help but come up with a hypothesis. Would Dr. Frankie's memory eventually regress to the time when he was a baby and become an ignorant baby in the end? Perhaps, when his memory regressed to the time when he was a baby, it would be the end of his life. Let me go. Let me go. The medical staff was injecting tranquilizers into Dr. Frankie, which could slightly suppress the activity of his brain. However, when he woke up, his activity would further increase. This could only be a method of drinking poison to quench thirst. Seeing Dr. Frankie's half-closed eyes, Mr. Orphe suddenly quivered. Stop. Stop them. Mr. Orphe, if we stop now, we won't be able to inject the doctor with nutrient supply. His body won't be able to take it anymore. I said stop. Mr. Orphe grabbed the collar of the attending doctor with one hand. The fierce aura he had accumulated over the years suppressed the attending doctor so much that he could not even breathe properly. He could only quickly shout for the medical staff to stop. At this moment, Mr. Orphe directly broke into the intensive care unit. He untied the restraints on Dr. Frankie's hands and feet. Looking at Dr. Frankie, who was half awake due to the crazy consumption of energy, Mr. Orphe reached out and took a bottle of synthetic nutrient solution from the side. Listen, you want to leave, don't you? You want to take your son to Boz's game, don't you? Mr. Orphe glared at Dr. Frankie. If you want to go out, I can take you out. But you have to eat up all these food for me. If you agree, nod your head. Dr. Frankie nodded with difficulty. Mr. Orphe carefully fed the nutrient solution into Dr. Frankie's mouth and let him drink it. These nutrient solutions actually contained sleeping ingredient. After Dr. Frankie took it, he quickly fell into a state of drowsiness. The attending doctor wiped his sweat and walked in at this moment. He sighed and said, he finally ate it. However, the known nutrient supply is almost unable to keep up with Dr. Frankie's consumption. Mr. Orphe, perhaps we should consider a backup plan. Every time, he would use a more advanced nutrient supply, and Dr. Frankie's body would quickly adapt to the external energy replenishment. Soon, the nutrient supply that could be produced with current technology would not be able to keep up with Dr. Frankie's consumption. At that time, if a solution could not be found, therefore, the expert group proposed a final solution. That was to freeze Dr. Frankie's body. In a situation where the current technology could not solve the problem, the only choice was to freeze Dr. Frankie and wait for the day when the technology would make a breakthrough in the future. At this time, Mr. Orphy carried Dr. Frankie up and seemed to be planning to leave the intensive care unit. The attending doctor was shocked. "Mr. Orphy, what are you doing?" Mr. Orphy took a deep breath and said, "Help me contact the Frozen Man Company in Europe." "Has he made a decision in his heart?" The attending doctor stared blankly as Mr. Orphy carried Dr. Frankie away. At the last moment, he subconsciously shouted, "Where are you taking him?" "To watch the game." The car was driving fast on the road. Behind it, there were several cars of the same model, and behind them, there was also a white ambulance. In the car at the front, Mr. Orphy, who was driving, glanced at the box in front of him. It was filled with high-concentration nutrient supply brought out from the hospital. "Oh, I don't like this taste. Do you have orange-flavored ones?" In the passenger seat, Dr. Frankie frowned and wanted to spit out the meatball that he had just eaten. However, Mr. Orphy reached out and covered Dr. Frankie's mouth. "You need to swallow it. Otherwise, I won't take you to the court." "Okay, Nagy Matthew." Dr. Frankie shook his head and reluctantly gulped. It seemed that not only was his memory regressing, but his memory was also in disorder. At this time, Dr. Frankie recognized Mr. Orphy as one of his old buddies, Mr. Matthew, the curator of the Science and Technology Museum. "Hey, Matthew, are there so many buildings around here? Why can't I remember?" Dr. Frankie looked at the scenery outside the window with interest at this time. Mr. Orphy did not know how the world in Dr. Frankie's eyes was structured. He could only follow the meaning of Dr. Frankie's words, so he could only helplessly say, "This world is changing with each passing day. You stay in the laboratory all day, so of course you don't know the changes in the outside world." Dr. Frankie, on the other hand, laughed disdainfully. "Nonsense! The changes in the world come from technology. If it weren't for the technology developed by us scientists in the laboratory all day long, how could the world change? We know better than they do." "I didn't mean to deny you." Mr. Orphy shook his head. Dr. Frankie frowned at this time. "Matthew, did we miss the time? Is Orphy really waiting for me at the stadium?" "It's all my fault. I actually forgot about this. If you hadn't reminded me, I would still be in the office grading test papers." At this time, Dr. Frankie should still be a teacher in the National University, far from being recruited to the National Scientific Research Institute. "When did I remind you?" "Oh yes, I reminded you." Mr. Orphy sighed. "You really often forget about your family because of work. It can't be helped, can it? Our professor plans to choose an assistant, which will be very helpful to me in the future." Dr. Frankie shook his head. "You don't have a family, so you won't understand." Mr. Orphy smiled bitterly. "But have you ever thought about it, Orphy? He may not be happy to see you so busy. Maybe he wants you to stay at home with him more, even if it's just to play football for an afternoon? Speaking of this makes me angry. This kid's birthday wish this year was to watch a football game, and he even said that he would become a great football player when he grows up." Dr. Frankie gritted his teeth at this time. Mr. Orphy was stunned. Becoming a football player is a good dream. Isn't this the case for children? Becoming a great football player. That was a dream many years ago. Dr. Frankie shook his head and didn't speak. He just squinted his eyes and leaned back in his seat without saying a word. Mr. Orphy saw this and quickly opened the box full of nutritional pills nervously, and pushed Dr. Frankie's shoulder. Frankie, don't sleep, we're almost there. Frankie, have some candy. Frankie. Matthew. Don't disturb me." Dr. Frankie opened his eyes at this time, slapped Mr. Orphy hard and scolded. "I'm so sleepy, I can't sleep for a while. You just ruined my good dream, do you know? I just dreamed that Orphy grew up and married a beautiful bride, and he was taking the wedding ring of the pledge from my hand. Bastard. You actually woke me up at this time. You'll bear the anger of all fathers in the world." I curse you to be single for life. I've already taken it from you once, Father. Is that so? I'm sorry. Mr. Orphy suddenly choked. At this time, Mr. Orphy's Bluetooth headset suddenly rang. Mr. Orphy glanced at Dr. Frankie, and saw him squint his eyes again, saying that he wanted to continue the dream of Orphy getting married. Sir, it's been arranged. But because of the lack of time, we can only ask the club that Potts was in to select a team of reserve players. Their main players are playing elsewhere at this time. After all, to recreate the game of that year is really... Mr. Orphy glanced at Dr. Frankie again and lowered his voice. Listen, I'll be there in 15 minutes. Let the players get ready. There were not many people in the football field. Mr. Orphy suddenly felt lucky. Fortunately, the club that the player he liked when he was a child played for was not famous and had always been in Serie B. If not for this, he really did not know where to find a large audience. But even so, a large number of extras had been pulled in, so that the place was not too empty, just like in the past. It's already started? Dr. Frankie opened his eyes. In fact, he was now like a patient suffering from narcolepsy. He would fall into a state of near drowsiness after taking 2 steps, but for some reason, he could always wake up. Dr. Frankie did not mention Orphy again. Originally, Mr. Orphy had arranged for a young actor to temporarily act as the childhood Orphy, but it seemed that there was no need for him at this time. The young actor was on standby not far away, looking at a group of extras in front of him holding up the banner and shouting with all their might. Then he pulled the corner of Orphy's secretary's clothes. Even if I don't play, I still have to charge. The secretary stared at the little guy with a frown and secretly said, "This kid will have a rich future." He shook his head with a wry smile and then looked at Mr. Orphy, wondering what his officer and Dr. Frankie were talking about at this time. "Hey, Potts, give me some strength. Did you not eat?" Like a young man, from this old body that was about to collapse, he was now bursting with the vitality of a man in his prime. Mr. Orphy was a little worried and pulled Dr. Frankie, who wanted to rush out of the auditorium. "Frankie, old man, can you be a little more civilized?" "I'm sorry, I was too excited." Dr. Frankie sat down and then looked around. "Matthew, have you seen Orphy? He seems to have disappeared." With that, Dr. Frankie stood up anxiously again. Mr. Orphy was stunned. It seemed that his father had just remembered this matter. He hesitated for a moment and gave up the idea of asking his secretary to call the young actor. He said directly, "Have you forgotten? Orphy went to the bathroom." "Is that so?" Dr. Frankie nodded and sat down again. He shook his head and said, "In fact, I'm too angry to watch this. I'd rather stay in school and continue to mark papers or do experiment." Mr. Orphy smiled. "You don't like sports in the first place." Recalling the time when Dr. Frankie brought him to watch this match, Mr. Orphy smiled subconsciously as he recalled how he slept for the entire second half of the match in the chaotic environment. Dr. Frankie shook his head and muttered, "Orphy likes it. You'll understand when you become a father." Dr. Frankie gently punched Mr. Orphy's shoulder. "I don't understand." Mr. Orphy looked at Dr. Frankie, and a string in his heart was touched. "I don't understand you. I don't understand why you always talk about Orphy, but why do you always leave him with your back view? I don't understand that until later, you only have Weiwei in your heart. Is that so? You don't understand, you don't understand." Dr. Frankie muttered to himself, seeming to have remembered something. Mr. Orphy was keenly aware of Dr. Frankie's abnormality, and he suddenly felt a little excited. However, he heard Dr. Frankie suddenly shrugging. "Of course you don't understand, because you're not a father, ha." "Yes, I'm not." Mr. Orphy sighed and looked at the players on the football field below. "Indeed, I can say that you. In fact, I've been the same all these years." "Why are you suddenly so negative?" Dr. Frankie asked curiously. Mr. Orphy turned his head and patted Dr. Frankie's leg. He smiled and shook his head. It's nothing, I just suddenly thought of my father. Oh, old Matthew must have brought you a lot of good memories. Dr. Frankie nodded. Mr. Orphy's body suddenly trembled. He was sure that he needed to do something, and an almost instinctive impulse made him stand up abruptly. He looked at Dr. Frankie. You're right, they played really badly. I really should scold them. Dr. Frankie was stunned. Mr. Orphy grabbed the guardrail with both hands at this time, and his body almost leaned out. He scolded, Hey, boss. Dogsh *T. Hurry up and use all your strength. You weak-legged trash. Dogsh *T. It was so loud that people could hear it even from afar. The secretary who was on standby and a group of medical staff who were on standby looked at each other. The secretary was even a little relieved that there were no reporters here. Otherwise, as an important member of the country, it would be very damaging to Mr. Orphy's image in public. Dogsh *T. Boz, you're a piece of dogsh *T. Dr. Frankie laughed and stood up at this time. He imitated Mr. Orphy and leaned out. Dogsh *T. Dogsh *T. Go to hell. Mr. Orphy suddenly exerted force and threw the inflatable baton in his hand into the field. Dogsh *T. Go to hell. Dr. Frankie excitedly imitated Mr. Orphy and threw the inflatable baton in his hand. The two suddenly burst into laughter. After that, Dr. Frankie fell asleep and couldn't be woken up. The team doctor hurried forward and sent Dr. Frankie to the ambulance for examination. The conclusion was that Dr. Frankie's body had deteriorated even more after this trip, so he needed to be sent back to the hospital immediately. Mr. Orphy nodded in silence and agreed. However, not long after, while the ambulance was still on the road, Dr. Frankie suddenly opened his eyes, scaring the medical staff next to him so much that they became flustered. But obviously, this time, Dr. Frankie's memory didn't go backward, nor did it go forward. Instead, it went back to the state of that day in the research institute. Dr. Frankie's hands were pressed on the stretcher bed. The doctor tried to calm Dr. Frankie down, but he kept struggling. His eyes were unfocused. After realizing that his hands couldn't move, he quickly stopped struggling. However, his lips began to move rapidly, and he kept chanting some complicated and profound words. No, the sedative has also lost its effect. The attending doctor suddenly became flustered. How could this be? How could this be? The dose injected is enough to make an adult elephant. Then do you still want to continue? Mr. Orphy angrily grabbed the attending doctor's arm when he saw that the attending doctor wanted to hit Dr. Frankie again. But if his brain doesn't cool down, the attending doctor said in horror, Mr. Orphy, he's going to die. From the looks of it, it'll be soon. Blood slowly flowed out of Dr. Frankie's nostrils, but he didn't seem to be aware of it. His eyes were still blank, and he was still performing verbal calculations. But if too much sedative was injected, it would still kill. Materials. Give me materials. I need materials. Give me materials. Dr. Frankie suddenly looked at Mr. Orphy. Materials. Materials. What materials? Mr. Orphy quickly asked. Materials. 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 Mr. Orphy clenched his teeth and suddenly shouted, Go to the research center. Go to the research center. He didn't know what materials were needed, but there was probably no place that had more materials than the research center of a country. When the director of the research center heard the news, he was shocked, but also seemed to realize something. When Dr. Frankie was sent to the research center, the director's face turned pale when he saw the state this old friend of his was in. Mr. Orphy's steps were very heavy. He silently followed beside the bed with his head lowered. When the director came up to ask about the situation, he just directly asked, Are the materials ready? I don't know what materials are needed. The director shook his head. but I asked people to move everything that can be moved here. Frankie, maybe it's what you want. Mr. Orphy's voice was very cold. He suddenly stopped, looked at the director, and said coldly, I won't allow you to miss anything. The dean nodded his head heavily. At this time, the researchers of the research center had already cleared out a large area. The so-called materials took up almost 2/3 of the space in the room. They even prepared all kinds of tools. Under the different gazes of everyone, Dr. Frankie went from needing people to support him at the beginning to suddenly rushing into the materials as if he was flying, and began to madly search for something. Unlike last time, when he wrote a lot of advanced knowledge on the wall, Dr. Frankie just turned over the materials here. A lot of precious materials were turned over by him and scattered on the ground like garbage. Seeing this, many people frowned and seemed to feel heartache. Suddenly, Dr. Frankie seemed to have found what he was looking for, and then quickly put it on the work table. It was something that looked like a wooden board. This is a wooden board? A researcher looked at Dr. Frankie in confusion as he began to knock on the wooden board. In fact, it was indeed a wooden board that was broken off from a wooden box containing precious materials. Then, Dr. Frankie took out a ruler, a hacksaw, nails, and the most common tools and began to cut the wooden board. No one knew what Dr. Frankie wanted to do. But when Dr. Frankie cut the wooden board halfway, he suddenly stopped, as if he was thinking about something. He picked up an oil pen and began to write on the work table. Go and see what he wrote. The director frowned and ordered a researcher to go over. The researcher nodded. Under Mr. Orphy's sharp gaze, he only dared to quietly go to Dr. Frankie's side and look at the work table. At first, he frowned and seemed to be puzzled, but gradually, as Dr. Frankie wrote more and more, he began to open his mouth. In the end, the researcher even hurried back. Yes, slow down. Don't panic. It's a design drawing. The researcher quickly said, It seems to be the design drawing of a 3-stage rocket, but I've never seen the structure. I can't calculate it. Get someone here. The director made a prompt decision. It seemed like the scene in the conference room last time. A large number of researchers began to gather here. They scanned the drawing on the work table into the computer and began to analyze its structure. They even began to make data models so that they could draw some conclusions in an instant. Mr. Orphy didn't care about the enthusiasm and exclamations of these scientists. He just looked at Dr. Frankie's back. It was still the same back view. It had always been the same back view she had given him. The attending doctor beside him became more and more anxious. He couldn't help but whisper in Mr. Orphy's ear, Mr. Orphy, are you really not going to stop Dr. Frankie? He has been in this state for a long time. If he doesn't stop, I'm afraid there's really no way. Didn't you guys already run out of ways? Mr. Orphy glanced at the attending doctor. He couldn't say a word. Too little time was given to him and the group of experts behind him. They didn't have any reference cases in the past. Facing Mr. Orphy's gaze, he could only shake his head sadly. Mr. Orphy no longer paid attention to the attending doctor. Instead, he looked at Dr. Frankie's back and murmured, So? Are you satisfied? Mr. Orphy sighed. He felt that there was no need to keep him alive. At least, he couldn't bear to see Dr. Frankie fall in front of his eyes. At least, let his greatness stay in his heart. Burdened with the lives of an entire team, including his own daughter-in-law, Mr. Orphy knew better than anyone else how tormenting this guilt was to Dr. Frankie. Because he and Dr. Frankie had always lived under the same roof and had the most intimate relationship in the world. But because of this, he couldn't let Dr. Frankie go. He also couldn't let himself forgive Dr. Frankie. Maggie. Was she also watching at this time? In a trance, Mr. Orphy seemed to see many figures that didn't belong here. His wife's figure, his wife Maggie's colleagues, those who lost their lives in the disaster a long time ago. Mr. Orphy knew that this was an illusion that he saw, a scene interwoven by mental torment. They were all by Dr. Frankie's side, around that workbench. What was left behind by those who had left had always been on Dr. Frankie. Their spirits, their wills. Is it these that have been supporting you all the time? Mr. Orphy murmured to himself. He seemed to see Maggie looking at him. He smiled and made a gesture of silence. Then he looked at Dr. Frankie attentively, as if to say, "Look, this is our pride." Mr. Orphy wanted to say something, but he stopped abruptly. He closed his eyes and tried to remember this scene that was interwoven by reality and illusion. That's it. Mr. Orphy gave his blessing to Dr. Frankie. He suddenly wanted to knock on the empty office of the Research Institute, the office that belonged to his wife Maggie. He remembered that there seemed to be a family photo on the table in that office. Perhaps it was time to take this relic back. Hey, this model, why doesn't it match the design? Let me see. Strange, isn't the structure of this rocket model too old? Where have I seen this before? M901 satellite. This is the model of the rocket thruster used in the M901 satellite plan, I remember now. Amidst the chaos, Mr. Orphy suddenly stopped and turned around to look at the back of the old man who was carefully assembling an old model. This model, what is the doctor doing? While pushing the design of the latest rocket model, he is also making the oldest model. It doesn't match at all? Mr. Orph walked towards Dr. Frankie step by step. His back was getting closer and closer to Dr. Frankie. It was much closer than when Dr. Frankie watched Dr. Frankie's back when Dr. Frankie woke up and watched Dr. Frankie's back when Dr. Frankie was hiding outside the study. Well, I remember now, this rocket was Frankie's entry in the science and technology competition that year. Because of the structure of this rocket, he won the championship. Since then, the Research Institute discovered him when he was still teaching at the university. Well, it is indeed this model. The director of the Research Institute recalled the memory from a long time ago, but he was very puzzled by Dr. Frankie's assembly of this model. But Mr. Orphy had already come to the workbench. Orphy, what do you want for your birthday this year? Rocket, I want a rocket. I want to go to space, I want to be an astronaut. Orphy, we can't find such a thing in our country. How about something else, a new football? I don't care, I don't care. I want to be an astronaut. I want to sit on a rocket. Okay, Dad will make one for you. Orphy, look what I made for you. Thump, 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 the rocket is coming. I don't want it, this rocket can't fly into the sky. Well, it takes a long time to make a big rocket. Take this first, and later Dad will make a real rocket for you, one that can send people and satellites, okay? Really? I won't lie to you. It's a deal. It's a deal. It's a deal. Mr. Orphy slowly put his hand on the back of Dr. Frankie's hand and firmly grasped it. It's a deal. Dr. Frankie's body slightly trembled, but he quickly continued to assemble the model on the workbench. Everything, all for you. Chapter 854. When a model component in Dr. Frankie's hand suddenly slipped from his hand, everything seemed to be still. It was as if everything had suddenly turned into gray, a gray without any temperature. It was also like the moment after an explosion, where all sounds were drowned out. Dr. Frankie slowly fell to the ground, as if weightless. The world slowed down, and his body staggered before finally lying on the ground. The impact made his cheeks tremble. Mr. Orphy reached out his hand at this time, but he couldn't catch it. Dad! Doctor! The crowd's shouts came like a tide, and everything became dazzling again. The lights in the research room were as white as day, bright and beautiful, just like the sun. Dr. Frankie looked at the light above his head, and a circle of brilliance appeared in his pupils. A smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. He slowly closed his eyes. They didn't want Dr. Frankie's life to end, and they wanted to try to save Dr. Frankie at the last moment. The traffic in the city became crowded again, but the road leading to the hospital was unusually smooth. Outside the operating room, not only was Mr. Orphy there, but also the director of the Scientific Research Institute and a group of anxious researchers. It didn't take long for Dr. Frankie's other old friend, Matthew, the curator of the Science and Technology Museum, to rush over after hearing the news. Curator Matthew was much closer to Dr. Frankie than he was to the director of the Scientific Research Institute. Matthew was Frankie's best friend. He came to Mr. Orphy, hugged him silently, and patted Mr. Orphy on the shoulder hard, giving the elder the comfort he could. "I didn't expect this to happen." Matthew sighed in front of Mr. Orphy. "That day. It wasn't long before he came to visit me with little Louis. I also promised him to discuss it with Mr. Billy again. How can he fall down now? I haven't convinced Billy yet. Why can't he fall down now?" Mr. Orphy didn't speak. His mind was full of Dr. Frankie's smile after he fell down. His mood was calmer than anyone else's. Looking at the corridor full of people, Mr. Orphy walked silently to the corner and lit a cigarette. The cigarette was taken from someone else. In fact, Mr. Orphy had quit smoking for a long time. He understood that it was only because of his naive request that Dr. Frankie embarked on this never-ending path. However, the doctor continued to move forward. Perhaps, at first, he was only doing it because of a child's joke, but as more and more like-minded researchers appeared, perhaps the persistence in his heart was no longer just for a promise to his child. Later on, he even carried the lives of the entire team on his shoulders. Mr. Orphy suddenly remembered a saying he had heard somewhere: "No change in human history is an idyll. It is accompanied by tears and pain." "How foolish!" Mr. Orphy muttered. He was talking about himself, Dr. Frankie, and the people who were struggling at the forefront of the society. "Sir." It was unknown when Barbara had arrived at the hospital, but she had brought Louis with her. She looked at Mr. Orphy fearfully and mustered her courage to say, "I think I should have brought Louis with me." Mr. Orphy glanced at his son. The child probably didn't know what had happened. He just looked at the surrounding environment and revealed an unprecedented panic. Mr. Orphy reached out to comfort Louis's head. The child suddenly threw himself at Mr. Orphy and grasped Mr. Orphy's clothes tightly. After a long wait, the lights in the operating room suddenly dimmed. As the door of the operating room opened, the neurologist and the attending doctor of this consultation slowly walked out. The attending doctor took off his mask and shook his head at Mr. Orphy, who was the family member. His face was full of sadness. At this moment, even those who had been mentally prepared still thought it was a joke after hearing the verdict. The director and the curator, Matthew, both raised their heads. Of course, they didn't feel relieved, but they suddenly felt that something was missing in their lives. Barbara covered her mouth at once and couldn't stop her tears from falling. She had worked for this family for several years and naturally had a much deeper relationship with them than others. Louis lowered his head on Mr. Orphy's body and didn't want to raise it. However, Mr. Orphy suddenly patted Louis on the shoulder. "Son, aren't you going to say goodbye to your grandfather?" Little Louis raised his head and looked at Mr. Orphy, who had a smile on his face. He suddenly felt that this was the ugliest smile he had ever seen from his father. He didn't know how to describe it. He felt that this smile was like a piece of white paper with nothing on it. The hospital soon announced the time of death. The patient passed away. Except for the patient's family members, no one else had anything to do with it. Some researchers began to depart under the director's arrangement. The director stayed until late at night and finally left with the curator of the Science Museum, Matthew. The two of them agreed to find a quiet place to sit for a while. They went for a drink. They said that they hadn't drunk with Frankie for a long time. They said that they would go to Frankie's favorite bar and that it must still be open. They said that they would drink enough for 3 people tonight and that Frankie would leave them like this. They talked and talked. A white bed covered by a white sheet. The body covered by the sheet didn't move at all. In the room where the doctor's body was placed, Mr. Orphy stood silently. At this time, little Louis leaned on Mr. Orphy and sobbed from time to time. Maybe this is just a dream, an illusion. Maybe the body under the sheet will suddenly breathe in the next second. Mr. Orphy thought so. No one came to disturb Mr. Orphy and little Louis, saying goodbye to Dr. Frankie. After a long time, little Louis fell asleep because he was too tired. After all, he was just a child. "Sir, I'm sorry for your loss." Barbara took little Louis from Mr. Orphy's hand. Mr. Orphy heaved a long sigh and instructed the secretary waiting outside, "Send Barbara and Louis back. I want to stay here for a while longer." At this time, the secretary didn't forcibly stop him but nodded. "Sir, I'll come back to pick you up after sending Miss Barbara and Louis off." Mr. Orphy nodded and waved his hand to let them leave. He sat alone outside the door of the morgue and rubbed his cheeks. It was very quiet around. There wasn't even a pedestrian in the corridor. It was a completely quiet world. It should be the secretary who arranged to block the corridor to prevent unauthorized people from intruding. Although it was a bit of an abuse of power, Mr. Orphy wasn't angry at this time, nor did he think it was good. He just didn't want to think too much about it. Behind the door was the world of death, and in this world, Dr. Frankie might be walking away. Mr. Orphy leaned his head against the wall and looked at the light on the ceiling of the corridor without focus. I smell death." Suddenly, a deep man's voice sounded in the corridor, accompanied by the rhythmic sound of heels hitting the floor. Because of the silence, the voice was very clear and immediately pulled Mr. Orphy back to reality from his dazed state of mind. Mr. Orphy saw a strange guy with a carnival mask on his face and a strange costume, which looked like the white robe worn by bishops during important ceremonies. This guy wearing a carnival mask slowly walked in front of Mr. Orphy. With his hands behind his back, he looked a little mysterious. This made Mr. Orphy frown subconsciously. "Who are you?" As soon as he said this, Mr. Orphy's heart skipped a beat. He suddenly remembered something that his secretary had mentioned to him, the video of Mr. Besson being shot. "I smell death." The voice behind the carnival mask became deeper and deeper. "But, I can drive away death. Stop pretending to be mysterious." Mr. Orphy stared at the guy in front of him and instantly picked up the phone. But before the call was connected, Mr. Orphy's phone was quickly taken away, or rather, taken away from his hand. The person who did it wasn't the guy in the carnival mask in front of him, but another man who had walked up to him at some point. This man was wearing a grayish-black robe with a hood, like a wizard from a fairy tale. After taking away Mr. Orphy's phone, this guy quickly turned it off. "What do you want to do?" Mr. Orphy suddenly stood up. At this time, more and more guys in grayish-black robes appeared in front of Mr. Orphy. One of them put his hands on Mr. Orphy's shoulders and forced him to sit down. Come. In an instant, Mr. Orphy had these guys in strange costumes cover his mouth. He even struggled a little. The man in the carnival mask slowly reached out his hand and pressed it on Mr. Orphy's forehead, saying indifferently, "Foolish sinner, I forgive you." A faint white light spread from his palm and imprinted on Mr. Orphy's forehead. With the appearance of this faint light, the wizards around began to murmur. They were in awe and praises. Mr. Orphy felt terrible at this moment, because he had seen too many fanatical and irrational religious people. These guys were obviously believers of some religious organization. But this was not the only thing that made Mr. Orphy feel terrible. He felt very good at this moment, unprecedentedly spirited. The melancholy in his heart seemed to have been dispelled in an instant, and he even became spirited, as if he had just attended a ball. He was in a good mood. But this was obviously abnormal. I said, I can drive away death. At the same time, I can also take away sorrow." As he said this, the man in the carnival mask turned around and walked towards the door of the morgue. The two wizards beside him opened the door for him. Mr. Orphy only heard this mysterious guy say slowly, "I know you have a lot of doubts, but it doesn't matter. I will use a miracle to eliminate all the doubts in your heart, and let you see the true light of the extraordinary, and understand how great the miracle of life is. What do you want to do? Mr. Orphy suddenly became anxious. How did these people get in without making a sound? Mr. Orphy's body was lifted up by the wizards and sent into the morgue. All of the wizards entered at the same time. The adepts surrounded Dr. Frankie's bed in circles. The mysterious carnival masked man stood at the head of the bed, and Mr. Orphy was still being restrained by the adepts. Glancing at Mr. Orphy's shocked expression, the man in the carnival mask seemed very satisfied. He nodded and lifted the sheet on Dr. Frankie's head, making the doctor's pale face more visible. You are blaspheming the dead. You are breaking the law. Mr. Orphy struggled wildly, but the person who restrained him was abnormally strong. The man in the carnival mask. Buggy glanced at Mr. Orphy again. He didn't say anything, but he quietly lowered his head and looked at his palm. A piece of paper fell from his sleeve into Buggy's hand. He glanced at it, cleared his throat, and spoke in a low voice. Ah, what a beautiful and noble soul, but your life is so fragile. Buggy fell silent for a moment at this point. He then glanced at the paper in his hand again and continued. Lost sheep, I will lead you to a new world, grant you a new life, and give you precious time. Mr. Orphy listened to this mysterious person speak these strange words, but for some reason, he fell silent. What made Mr. Orphy incredulous was that at this moment there was a vague and absurd expectation in his heart. Frankie, feel the glory of my God, and then return to this world as my God's servant. All of a sudden, Bucky let out a loud cry and raised his hands high. Then, he suddenly shook his hands and pressed them on Dr. Frankie's chest. In an instant, the white light in the morgue expanded. At this moment, the people dressed as wizards all knelt on the ground and kowtowed to Buggy. No one restrained Mr. Orphy anymore. They were all shocked by this scene. Mr. Orphy's expression was both frightened and pale. He slowly walked to the bed and looked at Dr. Frankie's face. He suddenly opened his mouth, but Dr. Frankie's eyelids suddenly twitched. Then, the doctor's fingers also moved a little. Mr. Orphy walked to the other side of the bed in disbelief. He looked at the mysterious man in the carnival mask and then at Dr. Frankie, whose face gradually turned red. Finally, when Dr. Frankie suddenly opened his eyes, Mr. Orphy lost his mind. Orphy, where is this? Chapter 855. A cool breeze blew. This was an elevated floor of the hospital. Mr. Orphy didn't know how he was brought out and brought to this place. During the whole process, he was thinking about the fact that Dr. Frankie had woken up from the dead. After waking up, Dr. Frankie fell into a deep sleep again after being slapped by the mysterious man. Yes, he fell into a deep sleep. He was not lying on the bed with a cold body and no longer breathing like he was a while ago. Several wizards suddenly pushed Mr. Orphy forward. Mr. Orphy staggered 2 steps forward and saw the mysterious man, who claimed to be the messenger of God, was now looking at the night view of the city with his hands behind his back. I can keep Frankie alive. Mr. Orphy's heart suddenly jumped when he heard this. The messenger of God slowly turned around and said indifferently, "But in return, you have to be my servant." The messenger of God's legs slowly left the ground and showed Mr. Orphy an extraordinary power that was beyond the scope of science, completely breaking Mr. Orphy's inherent ideas. Why me? Ever since he left the morgue, Mr. Orphy had thought of countless things. He was not a person who would easily lose his cool or be bewitched, but the unnatural phenomenon of coming back from the dead was a huge shock to him. The messenger of God said indifferently, "I need to develop the church of my God, and before the glory of my God truly shines on the earth, I don't want to be hindered in any way by this country, so I need people who can serve my God. Mr. Orphy, Dr. Frankie's resurrection is the reward that my God gives you in advance. You want me to help you cover up all traces of your activities?" Mr. Orphy's heart suddenly trembled. As the head of the National Security Department, he had the authority to mobilize most of the country's secret forces, intelligence, and so on. He only needed an instant to imagine how quickly a new church that had his help would develop. But he knew nothing about the purpose of this religion. Are you willing? Buggy looked down and said word by word. Mr. Orphy suddenly smiled bitterly and looked up. You are actually a demon, right? This is a paid help, not a gift. His voice was so low that only Bucky in front of him could hear it. Just as Bucky was about to continue beating this guy and come up with the excuse he had prepared, he saw Mr. Orphy suddenly kneel down. Mr. Orphy raised his head and calmly said, I have nothing to hesitate about. God's messenger, is it? From now on, I will be your servant. But Mr. Orphy stood up again and said seriously, however, if you disappoint me, then what awaits this so-called church will be the military force of this country, all military force. God's emissary. Bucky chuckled, but he was actually scared to death. F***ck. Don't use the military might of a country to scare people. Although, I know you are really awesome. Bucky took a deep breath. It seemed that the miracle promised by Miss Servant Girl was almost done. Next, Bucky recalled the details that Miss Maid had said before the operation, and then said, Dr. Frankie's resurrection will cause a great upheaval in society. Mr. Orphy, I think you should know how to do it and how to cover it up. Then, there may be many more incredible things in society. I hope you can handle it well and don't let me down. God's emissary left quietly with his followers. Mr. Orphy stayed in the same place. He looked up at the starry sky and muttered to himself, Margie, I seem to have made a very stupid decision, but I can't refuse, and I won't refuse. What an incredible night it really existed, the resurrection of the dead. Fizz, fizz. A lamp in the hospital corridor suddenly flashed. It seemed that the voltage was unstable. At this time, a doctor in his 40s suddenly stopped in front of a door and gently knocked. Soon after, a voice came from the door. Who is it? I'm Ryan, Professor Machi. Dr. Ryan directly pushed the door and walked into Professor Machi's office. Professor Machi, who was sitting in the chair, asked curiously, What's the matter? Dr. Ryan. Dr. Ryan walked to the desk and sat down. He said seriously, Professor Mochi, I have something to ask you about Dr. Frankie's condition this time. I don't know if you can solve the doubts in my heart. Dr. Frankie? What happened to him? Professor Machi said regretfully, Oh, Dr. Frankie is really pitiful. Of course, his medical record is unprecedented. Maybe it's a rare contribution to medicine. At least we got a precious piece of information. Dr. Ryan shook his head, then stared at Professor Machi and said coldly, Professor, I'm not talking about Dr. Frankie's medical record, but something else. With that, Dr. Ryan put his hand into the pocket of his doctor's robe, then took out a small sealed bag and put it in front of Professor Machi, saying, This is a special nutritional pill you prescribed for Dr. Frankie to maintain his body's consumption. Oh, that's right, what's the problem? Professor Machi looked at Dr. Ryan indifferently. Dr. Ryan said, I took it to do a composition analysis and found many unknown elements. Also, the technology of making this pill seems to be beyond the current technology, right? So what? Professor Machi said calmly. Dr. Ryan smiled and said, Professor, I fed this drug to a white mouse. Guess what I found? What did you find? It's poison. Dr. Ryan sneered. Although I don't know how it was synthesized, it's obviously highly toxic. Although it can provide a huge amount of energy to the human body, I'm afraid it's forbidden, right? So? Dr. Ryan continued to sneer. Professor, if people know that you're secretly developing a dangerous forbidden drug, if Mr. Orphy knows that you gave Dr. Frankie such a dangerous drug, I wonder what will happen to you? Professor Mochi just smiled faintly. He reached out and picked up the small sealed bag that Dr. Ryan brought over. He looked at the small pill inside and said indifferently, "You should have extra copies on hand, right? Tell me, what do you want?" Dr. Ryan's eyes lit up. "It's very simple. For the next transfer, I hope you can recommend me to be the director. Then, I hope to participate in the development of this drug. I want to cooperate with you, Professor." A bit ambitious. Professor Machi nodded, but he was quite disappointed. "But is that all? It's a waste of my time." "What?" Dr. Ryan was suddenly startled. Professor Machi said indifferently, "This drug can't be used alone, it needs to be combined with another kind of medicine. The reason why I gave it to Dr. Frankie was that without it, Dr. Frankie couldn't have survived until now. I don't want my master to say that I didn't do a good job in after-sales service. So," under Dr. Ryan's horrified gaze, Professor Machi, as the attending doctor of Dr. Frankie's consultation, slowly changed. He gradually changed from a bad old man to an incredibly beautiful woman in a black dress. He became her, a beautiful woman. "So, I'm really not interested in you. Forget what happened tonight, and then destroy these drugs and your experimental data," Machi ordered in a clear voice. Click. Dr. Ryan was expressionless, like a puppet, gently pushed open the office door, and then walked out in a daze. They were all rich people with clean backgrounds, and almost all of them were in Mr. Besson's circle of friends. Buggy needed a large number of believers. Of course, he didn't explicitly tell Mr. Besson this, but Mr. Besson, who was completely immersed in the fanaticism of the great god Buggy, easily imagined what he needed to do. As the first servant of the messenger of God, as the closest servant to the omniscient and omnipotent god Buggy, how could he not contribute all his strength to spread his glory? Even his wife, who would quietly enter the room of the messenger of God at night to discuss various things, Mr. Besson pretended not to see it. Even if Mrs. Besson was happily serving the messenger of God in the room, Mr. Besson didn't mind at all, and even had an impulse to do it himself. So, of course, forgave her. Mr. Besson had planned to give everything he had. Therefore, there was nothing wrong with his wife, who he regarded as his own private property, also giving it to the messenger of God. After his wife came back, Mr. Besson would carefully ask his wife if there was anything that made the messenger of God unhappy during the whole process. He was afraid that his wife would make any mistakes in serving the messenger of God and make the great messenger unhappy. Mr. Besson was so dedicated that he wanted to contribute all his strength to the recovery of God Buggy. Therefore, when the messenger of God said that he was going to perform a great miracle in front of the believers, Mr. Besson suddenly felt as if he had received dozens of blessings, and his whole body was full of strength. A miracle! After the great messenger of God had finally saved him, he was going to create a miracle of life again. Mr. Besson couldn't sit still. He immediately rushed to inform all his friends who had secretly joined the church under his persuasion, especially those who only joined half-heartedly, but didn't really agree with him. They were the key to persuade. Thanks to Mr. Besson's hard work in preparing the outfits and waiting for orders, there were now so many followers dressed as wizards. In fact, the fact that the messenger of God had revived a person who had been confirmed dead by the hospital did not disappoint Mr. Besson and all the believers present. Mr. Besson, who was arranging the positions of these believers, was listening to these people quietly talking about this incredible night, and his heart was filled with excitement. Because from the content of these people's conversations, the tone of their voices, and the awe that they could not help but reveal, he was sure that after tonight, these people would become like him, wholeheartedly believing in the greatest omniscient and omnipotent God Buggy. Our great messenger of God. Mr. Besson was even thinking about whether he should encourage 2 more female believers to inherit the glory of the messenger of God tonight. Because Mr. Besson found one thing, that was, after inheriting the glory of the messenger of God for many nights, the skin of his wife had improved a lot recently, and she even looked a lot younger, just like when he married her a few years ago. Unfortunately, Mr. Besson lamented that he was not a woman. Otherwise, he would really like to do it himself and inherit the glory of the messenger of God. Would the messenger of God be interested in following behind? Buggy, who did not know what Mr. Besson was thinking, suddenly felt a chill on his back, as if he was being watched by something terrifying. Messenger, the last batch of people has been sent away. Don't worry, I was very careful. A friend of mine in this hospital is also a believer here. He is one of the shareholders here, so no one found out that we were here. Mr. Besson came in front of Buggy very enthusiastically. Buggy only felt that the chill on his back was getting heavier, and he suddenly shivered. Mr. Besson immediately asked with concern, Messenger, what's wrong with you? Is it because you are too tired to perform the miracle this time? Buggy looked up at the night sky and said slowly, I need to pee, so I need to go to the toilet first. After that, Buggy hurried to find the toilet. Mr. Besson stared at the back of the messenger of God who ran away, and said in amazement, He is indeed the messenger of God, even when he needs to pee, he is so unique. Of course, Buggy was not really in a hurry to pee, he was just looking for the servant girl who guided him to establish the sect. In the underground parking of the hospital, Buggy looked around and finally came to the door of the elevator, then he anxiously waited. The elevator had already started, and someone was coming down from the upper floor. Ding! When the elevator door opened, the servant girl in a black dress slowly walked out, and she saw Buggy at first glance. Buggy, why are you not going back? Why are you still here? Buggy quickly stepped forward and showed a flattering smile. I am here to report the result of tonight's battle to you. Miss Yi, I like you, this time is really. Unexpectedly, the servant girl waved her hand at this time and said indifferently, No need. From now on, I will stop tutoring you, and the development of your sect will depend on your own efforts. What? Buggy was stunned and hurriedly said, Don't, I still have a lot of things to rely on you. Yi suddenly looked at Buggy, and Buggy suddenly broke out in a cold sweat. You had nothing at the beginning, but now not only your spiritual power has increased greatly, but also you have such a fanatical believer as Besson. After this miracle, your prestige in the hearts of believers has been very high, and you even subdued Afi and let him serve you. Buggy, what do you think? What about Dr. Frankie? Buggy was worried at this time. I feel that even if I use the blessing spell, it doesn't seem to work. Yi threw a bottle of medicine to Buggy at this time. Take this, give Frankie 1 pill a week, and then use the blessing spell on him every day to maintain his life. Thank you, Miss Yi. Buggy was overjoyed and quickly took it with both hands. Unexpectedly, the servant girl said coldly, The charge is 200 units of the power of faith. Thank you for your patronage, customer. Of course, in view of the fact that you have just started to develop, I will allow you to pay on credit temporarily. Buggy, the messenger of God, suddenly twitched the corner of his mouth. Chapter 856. Although Buggy was very resistant to credit because it would make him feel like he had to bear the pressure of working for others, the power of faith could be produced endlessly, so Buggy didn't feel too sad. Generally speaking, a fanatical believer like Mr. Besson could produce 1 unit of strength of faith in 3 days, while a believer who was 1 level lower than Mr. Besson would need about 8 to 10 days to produce 1 unit of strength of faith. A unit of strength of faith had to be produced by the same believer, and it was impossible for several believers to make up the bill together. So in theory, even a fanatical believer like Mr. Besson could produce a threshold of strength of faith in his life. So in order to get more units of strength of faith, he either had to develop more believers or turn ordinary believers into loyal believers. It was said that there was a kind of believer who could produce more than 1 unit of strength of faith in a day, and these people were called petitioners by the gods. Petitioners generally lived in the gods' kingdom. Of course, Buggy was a very pragmatic person, so petitioners were too far away for him, and he didn't know how to create petitioners. In fact, He now had more than 80 believers, and the whole church was now completely in the early stage of developing mysterious ideas for a long time. First, he set a small goal, such as 1,000 believers. Then, if I want to buy something in the future, how can I find you? Bucky knew that he couldn't keep a super assistant like Miss Maid, so he simply began to plan for the future. When Lucifer contracted him, he even gave him the ability to call out to Lucifer. Thinking about it, this club couldn't be stingier than Lucifer, right? Miss Maid smiled at this time. My master left this with me before he went on vacation and asked me to give it to you when it's about time. Now is the time. With that, Yui handed a black card to Bucky. Bucky looked at it curiously, but he couldn't see anything special about it. There was only a special golden mark on it. Miss Maid said calmly, "This is a 5x 10% discount card. When you need it, it will guide you to our shop and you can enjoy a 10% discount for 5 transactions." Bucky nodded and asked curiously, "Why 5 times?" Miss Maid blinked her eyes and said, "Because there are also 10x 10% discount cards, 100x 10% discount cards, 5x 20% discount cards, 10x 20% discount cards, and even the highest level of the eternal 40% discount card. As for what kind of black card you can get in the end, it depends on your own efforts. The more generous the customer is, the longer the customer will be with us. Of course, the more benefits we will get. Isn't this the rule of business? Eternal 40% discount card." Bucky didn't think too much about it. He just did a simple arithmetic problem in his heart. He owed the club 200 units of the power of faith. If he had the eternal 40% discount card, that was to say 120 units would be enough. Bucky couldn't help breathing faster, and then asked nervously, "Has anyone really gotten the eternal 40% discount card?" Miss Maid said calmly, "Of course, and it's your predecessor." "Predecessor who?" Bucky was stunned. However, Miss Maid showed a beautiful smile and disappeared in front of Bucky. As she said, the work of tutoring Bucky had been completed, and she would not give Bucky any help for free. After finishing the conversation with Miss Maid, Bucky walked back along the road. From afar, Bucky saw his most loyal and lovely believer, Mr. Besson. As the first servant who took care of the daily life of the messenger of God, Mr. Besson was very loyal to his duty. Spitting saliva on his palms, he rubbed it twice and then wiped it on his hair. Bucky tidied up his appearance in the mirror of a car, and finally put on the carnival mask. Bucky walked out of the back of the car with his hands behind his back, and made a low cough. "Besson, my servant, you can leave now." "Messenger." Mr. Besson quickly came to Bucky and said with joy, "Just now, one of our lovely believers told me that he is willing to bring his family to you to listen to the gospel delivered by the messenger." "Oh really? Let's meet if there is a chance." Bucky nodded casually. Now, with the help of Miss Maid, Bucky felt that his foundation was stable, and he was not in a hurry at this time. As a noble messenger of God, how could he show his vulgarity? "Okay, I will tell him the truth." Mr. Besson nodded. Let his beautiful daughter and wife wait. "Messenger, you are really tired." Bucky coughed twice and said seriously, "I think it is inappropriate to let the future believers who want to listen to the gospel wait. Let's do it this way. If that person is free, let's meet tomorrow." "Messenger, you are so kind," Mr. Besson praised. "I will inform him of his arrival as soon as possible." Bucky nodded and added, "And his daughter and wife, I will not let them go." "What?" Mr. Besson was stunned. Bucky said calmly, "I mean, I will not let go of any opportunity to spread the glory of my Lord." In the praise of Mr. Besson again, Bucky happily got into the car and slowly left the underground parking lot of the hospital. At this time, Mr. Besson's phone suddenly rang again. It must be the good news brought by the believers again. "Messenger, can you let me answer the phone?" Bucky waved his hand. "This guy is good, but he needs to report to me every time he does something." Bucky yawned quietly and felt a little hungry. Recently, he felt that he was very easy to be hungry. Whenever he was hungry, he wanted to eat meat, especially the rare steak. Buggy never knew that this kind of half-cooked steak mixed with blood could be so delicious. Next time, should he ask the chef to try to make it more raw? Messenger. Another good news. Mr. Besson turned his head at this time with a look of surprise. Sure enough, under the guidance of my lord, more and more elites will join us. Oh, whose wife is it this time? I mean, who is it this time? Buggy asked curiously. Mr. Besson said at this time, she is different from my previous friends. This time, she is the real boss behind my company. Buggy was stunned. During this period of time, he and Mr. Besson's wife talked about the glory of human nature in simple terms from time to time, and Buggy also learned a lot about Mr. Besson from them. For example, how he became rich more than 10 years ago, and what business he was doing now. Mr. Besson's own company was actually a subsidiary of a big group, and so on. Mr. Besson was the president of such a small company, but his friends were already in the circle of rich people. If it was the big boss behind Mr. Besson, who knew how big the boss behind Mr. Besson was? Buggy suddenly became interested. Once he could subdue the big boss behind Mr. Besson, it would be immeasurably beneficial for his future development. Who is this man? Mr. Besson quickly said, It's Mr. San Fran. San Fran? Buggy was stunned. It seemed that he had never heard of this name. But since this man was the big boss behind Mr. Besson, he should have great power in society, right? But Buggy was not afraid at all. He had just subdued a big boss from the Ministry of Defense. Oh, I see. When I am free, bring him over and let me meet him. Messenger, I will not let you down. Mr. Besson nodded solemnly. By the way, what does the wife look like? Is she a smart woman? Buggy asked the question he was more concerned about. The car slowly left. My humble house. The humidity at night was a bit heavy, especially in this ancient city by the sea. Fortunately, it was summer now, and such humidity and cool wind obviously did not make people feel uncomfortable. Song Ying was still busy with the Song Dynasty group. Strictly speaking, the Song family had a big business but not a big family. Because Song Tianyu had crossed the sea in those years, he was the only real member of the Song family, and the rest were only a few loyal old servants. And most of these old people had reduced their losses in these years of hard work. Therefore, even if Song Tianyu later took root in South America and reorganized the Song family, the Song family was still in a situation where there were few people. People had their traditions, and Song Tianyu was a very traditional person. He still maintained some old ideas in many aspects, such as the family business should only be passed on to the sons and not to the daughters. Although Song Ying used her excellent performance to win Master Song's tolerance and change, she was still a long way from truly overthrowing Master Song's inherent values. She worked hard for this, even if she used the room as an office. After 11 o'clock, the servant brought supper and refreshment drinks. Song Ying put down the documents in her hand and picked up the cup, but suddenly remembered something, so she stopped and asked, "How's that guy learning? Did the etiquette teacher say anything?" The servant was actually not old, even younger than Song Ying. In fact, she was also a person who came out after being trained in the village. She was a graduate 2 years later than Gan Hong. Her name was Yukiko and she was Japanese. That guy. Yukiko was a lively girl. At this time, she blinked and asked wittily, "Miss Ying, who are you talking about?" Song Ying rolled her eyes. "Want to die? How do you want to do it?" Yukiko giggled. She was young, but she was very voluptuous. When she giggled, her chest bounced up and down shamelessly. She twirled a strand of her hair around her finger and said softly, "Young Master Chiu finished the etiquette teacher's guidance early. It should be about time for him to rest." Song Ying was stunned and frowned. "Finished early? Didn't he go easy on him?" Yukiko said, "Miss, you know how old-fashioned the etiquette teacher is. Even if we want to go easy on Master Chiu, Teacher Crowl won't do it. Song Ying shook her head. What do you mean? Yukiko said with a strange expression. Teacher Crowl said that Master Chiyo doesn't need to learn etiquette at all. As long as he sits here, it's already a model of etiquette. I don't know exactly what it is, but after Teacher Crowl went in, he came out not long after. He even scolded you, miss, and asked if you were deliberately making fun of him. Is he really that good? Song Ying frowned and said to herself, Crowl is the etiquette teacher of many descendants of ancient aristocrats. He can be said to be an encyclopedia of etiquette, but he gave such a high evaluation. Didn't he grow up in an ordinary family? Yukiko held her cheeks and said, Miss, don't you think that this Master Chiyo's appearance is too unbelievable? Song Ying looked at Yukiko. Yukiko didn't seem to notice the change in Song Ying's expression. She just stared blankly at the ceiling and said, You know, Master Chiyo just went out on a mission and picked up a random person. Unexpectedly, he turned out to be the relative that father has been looking for decades. Isn't this too much of a coincidence? Song Ying suddenly asked, What are you trying to say? Are you saying that there's something wrong with my uncle? Yukiko shook her head. Of course I won't doubt Master Chiyo. But this Master Chiyo who appeared out of nowhere is hard to say. Anyway, with the current technology, it's quite easy to forge a blood bond, right? Song Ying shook her head. When Yukiko said this, her heart was a little shaken. It was easy for others to think that there was something strange about the appearance of Master Chiyo, or even that he might have come for the Song family's wealth. After all, although Father Song didn't make it public that he was looking for his relative, it was impossible to say that there was no news of it after decades. If this was an elaborate scam, Father Song, her grandfather, really liked Luochiyo. This Luochiyo was carefully cultivated to please Father Song. Yukiko, help me do something. Thinking of this, Song Ying changed her tone and said seriously, You absolutely can't let fifth uncle know. Miss, go ahead. Yukiko patted her chest. Song Ying directly whispered into Yukiko's ear, I want you to go to China tonight. I will tell others that you are helping me on a business trip. After you arrive in China, I will give you the next step. Yukiko nodded. Then I'll leave right away. In the same humble house, Luochiyo's room was opposite Song Ying's room. Gan Hong's room was next to Luochiyo's room, and their rooms were the same. Using the words of ancient times, Gan Hong was probably defined as a servant girl who slept with a man. But at this time, Gan Hong was no longer there. She had been told to rest early. Of course, Luochiyo used a little trick to make this girl who insisted on staying up all night easily fall asleep. Really? Buggy has already entered the orbit. Luochiyo smiled slightly. Of course, he was not talking to the air, but to a three-dimensional projection on the table. It was only about 30 centimeters high. This was the projection of the club's servant girl in front of the boss. It looked so perfect everywhere, just like a real figurine, which made people want to hold it in their hands and play with it carefully. Now that Buggy has subdued Orphe, his future will be much easier. Miss Servant Girl was still working on her work report. Although the boss temporarily transferred most of his authority to Miss Servant Girl during his vacation, Miss Servant Girl had never changed her position. In Yu Ye's eyes, such a transfer of authority was just to share more trivial things for the master, so that he could have a pleasant vacation. You can deal with Buggy's affairs. I'm more curious about another thing. Luochiyo pondered for a while and suddenly asked, If you want to show a miracle, there should be many ways. Why did you choose to use Dr. Franch in the end? I think it must be dazzling at the last moment of his life. Miss Servant Girl whispered, Because it is so dazzling, Yi wants to keep it until you come back and see it with your own eyes. Time can brew fragrance, isn't that what you said? Luochiyo was stunned, looking at the delicate projection of Miss Servant Girl in front of him. His fingers moved slightly, wanting to touch the delicate projection's lips. It was a wonderful thought. Luochiyo took a deep breath. This suppressed emotion, this faint feeling that should have been born in a few words earlier, was really wonderful. Chapter 857. Due to the explosion caused by the gas leak, the Blazing Hot Lips bar had turned into a dilapidated building. Of course, this was what was announced to the public. The sky was a bit gloomy. At this time, in the basement of the destroyed Blazing Hot Lips bar, several figures were welcomed. They were Charlotte, Wolfgang, and Noah, whose face was covered by a hood. When Wolfgang brought this friend to visit, Charlotte deliberately wanted to observe this person from the Transcendence organization. However, no matter how hard she tried, she was unable to peek at this person's face. She only knew that this person was called Noah. Apart from that, she knew nothing. For Charlotte, Noah's existence was somewhat strange. It was as if although this person was standing in front of her, they were separated by countless worlds, an extreme sense of distance. What did His Highness Lucifer encounter in the end? Wolfgang sized up the surroundings of the bar's basement. This was the first place where Lucifer's power was released. It was also the place that bore the brunt of Lucifer's power the closest. Wolfgang picked up a marble fragment from the ground. The moment his finger touched it, the entire marble fragment turned into dust in an instant. Wolfgang stood up, patted the dust off his hand, and shook his head. Then, he looked at Noah. Noah? Noah nodded. Then, he passed by Wolfgang and Charlotte and arrived at the basement after the battle. He stretched out his jade-like hand from his robe and slightly opened his 5 fingers. A unique-looking book with a cover floated in front of Noah's palm. He quickly flipped it open. At the same time, circles of ripples began to appear under Noah's feet. The ripples spread out, covering the entire basement in circles. The entire basement's environment began to rapidly change, returning to its original state. The shattered stones, the rotten sofa, everything returned to its original state. Charlotte could not help but let out a cry of surprise. However, Wolfgang said, "This is not returning things to their original state. It is just returning time to the past. This is just the remnant effects of time." In other words, it was a technique similar to a projection, but even so, it was enough to make Charlotte feel amazed by Noah. If he was not someone who dabbled in the law of time, he would naturally not be able to do this. This guy, even in the Transcendence organization, he should be a special member, right? With that thought in mind, the basement returned to its original state: light, softness, luxury, and colors that made Charlotte intoxicated. This place was filled with her and Lucifer's memories. Suddenly, the basement's door, Lucifer and Charlotte walked in. They directly passed through the bodies of Wolfgang and the other 2, and finally arrived at the center of the basement, where they were discussing something. The image of time. At this moment, Charlotte suddenly felt a sense of fear in front of Noah's strength. If he could even peek into time, what secrets would there be in this world for this mysterious guy? Charlotte could not help but feel nervous, but her nervousness did not last long. In the image of time before her eyes, Lucifer was taking out a page from Wolfgang's book and discussing it with Charlotte. Charlotte knew that this was not good because she clearly remembered that Lucifer should be discussing with her how he tricked Wolfgang, and now the main character was here. Charlotte could not help but sneak a peek at Wolfgang and quietly reach her hand behind her back. But at this time, Noah suddenly waved his hand, and the strange book in his hand instantly flipped to a page. The image of time in front of her was like a fast-forwarded movie. It skipped a lot of content and came to a few seconds before Lucifer's power erupted. Charlotte could not help but secretly breathe a sigh of relief. Noah fast-forwarded this part. She did not know if it was intentional or just because he wanted to get the most important information directly. At this time, in the image of time, "I don't know who you are, but don't you plan to pay a little price for having designs on my prey?" When Lucifer said this sentence, it was the scene in Charlotte's memory. The great queen of hell vomited a mouthful of blood and fell to the ground. After this, it was not different from Charlotte's memory. Lucifer began to reveal a corner of her true power. Next, it would be a competition between Lucifer and the mysterious chain. However, what made Charlotte feel inconceivable was that the scene in the image of time at this moment was somewhat different from what happened in her memory. Lucifer disappeared, and those mysterious chains also disappeared. However, the basement was still suffering severe damage. Charlotte also hit the wall due to the impact of some force. How could this be? Charlotte couldn't help but let out a cry of surprise. If the image of time in front of her was compared to a recorded videotape, then in this video, the existence of Lucifer and those chains seemed to have been directly taken away by someone. They became things that suddenly destroyed themselves, and the strange impression of Charlotte suddenly hitting the wall. Wolfgang frowned and said nothing about this strange impression. Noah waved his hand again and flipped the strange book forward. The image of time returned to the time before Lucifer vomited blood and fell to the ground. Then, it continued to play in sequence. Even when it was played again, Lucifer still disappeared in the following image. Noah made a puzzled sound and rewound the image of time again. However, after repeating the operation several times, it still could not change the fact that Lucifer had been erased. Finally, Noah closed his book and fell silent. Noah? Wolfgang waited for a moment, but in the end, he was somewhat impatient. What happened? Noah said slowly, someone erased this fact, erased it from the plane of time. God's forbidden zone? Who could it be? Wolfgang suddenly became somewhat solemn. Time and space, even in the organization of transcendence, were quite rigorous and important topics. It was a domain that most transcendents could not touch. They referred to time and space as forbidden zones. The forbidden zones of time, space, and life. These three were collectively known as the three great forbidden zones, and were ultimately categorized into the domain of the gods. They were the true definition of gods, and not the gods that could be recognized in human consciousness today. It might not be the true forbidden zone of the gods. Noah mused. For example, my gemstone sword can do something similar, but it's used to cut through space. Therefore, some special primordial treasures might be able to do it as well. Even individuals born with the power of time might be able to do it. Could the chain that Charlotte mentioned be such a primordial treasure? Wolfgang asked solemnly. However, Noah only shook his head. In the long history of time, I have never come across a chain that could control time. Any trace of Lucifer has been erased here, and this is no longer something that could be done by something that has just stepped into the forbidden zone of time. In other words, we still can't find Lucifer, right? Charlotte was not in the mood to care about this. She was only concerned about Lucifer's whereabouts. At this time, her tone was somewhat dissatisfied. Wolfgang, didn't you say that you were very powerful, but in the end you were not completely ignorant? Let's leave here first. Noah waved his hand coldly. Wolfgang realized something. Transcendents were always monitored by the world's will. Although they used special methods to make themselves immune to the gaze of the world's will for a short time, it was not a long-term solution. In particular, if transcendents used their power in the origin world, the duration of their immunity would be greatly reduced. Therefore, transcendents could only move around in the origin world for a very short time with their own power. This time, Noah directly used the power of the Book of Space, which might have caused a reaction from the world's will. Wolfgang quickly nodded, then quickly left this place with Noah, not even bothering to say goodbye to Charlotte. Wait a minute, what are you doing? Charlotte was a little confused by the two's actions and froze on the spot. Then, she heard Wolfgang's voice from afar. Miss Charlotte, don't worry, we will come to find you again soon. What the hell? Charlotte didn't know whether to laugh or cry. These transcendents were simply unreliable. It was better to use her own divination skills. Hey! Charlotte sighed and simply took out her crystal ball. But at this time, a brawny man wearing a wrestling mask quickly walked out of the ruins to Charlotte. The brawny man lowered his head and said, Lady Charlotte, I still can't find traces of my brother and Chi-Chi. They also disappeared. What? The brawny man and the three-headed hound, Chi-Chi, were sent by Charlotte not long ago to search for a missing three-star demon, but unexpectedly, after they went, they also disappeared. This made Charlotte feel the seriousness of her loss of composure. As the queen, Lucifer disappeared, and now the demons under her were also disappearing one after another. This made Charlotte suddenly feel that something in the darkness was controlling everything. Charlotte gritted her teeth and suddenly said resolutely, "Summon all the demons back. Tonight I want to perform a blood sacrifice. I want to use the great divination skill." The younger brother was stunned. He opened his mouth, but he did not dare to disobey Charlotte's orders and could only leave quickly. The so-called blood sacrifice was a ritual that used the lives of demons as sacrifices to greatly increase the accuracy of divination. I just don't know, can this great divination skill defeat Lady Charlotte's innate, guiding light attribute? I feel like there's a bottomless abyss ahead. The younger brother sighed and began to summon the demons hidden in this city. The sound of the shower head drowned out the sound of talking. In the bathroom of dormitory 403, Arnaud was talking to Boston. Because he had to take the college exam these few days, and because he had to keep an eye on Caroline, Arnaud did not exchange identities with Haley. But he could not leave Boston and his gang alone. Arnaud knew very well what kind of people were in Boston's gang. They were a group of people with poor self-control, brainless, and prone to making mistakes. Arnaud did not like to see his efforts wasted because of these guys' momentary laxity. At present, there were two main things that Arnaud ordered the Boston gang to do. The first was to temporarily stabilize the sales of bath salts and let the powerful big shots investigate and kill each other. His side would temporarily lie low and wait for the opportunity. In fact, Arnaud was already considering whether to create some conflicts for these big shots to speed up the consumption of strength among them. The other thing was to follow Mr. Carlo's lead. Because there was a large amount of wealth from a high-end apartment here, Carlo intended to cheat Nia out of her life-saving money, and Arnaud intended to eat up all of it. Mr. Carlo has been to a lot of places these few days and has seen a lot of people. It seems that the property sale should be completed soon. On the other end of the phone, the person who reported to Arnaud was the big cousin, who had been sent to follow Carlo. Arnaud nodded with satisfaction, and then carefully gave a few instructions to the big cousin. After that, he called Boston and asked about Haley's current situation. When he learned that Haley's mood had become more and more unstable in the past few days, Arnaud did not say anything. Haley had a strong tendency to violence, otherwise, he would not have killed their father by mistake back then. In fact, Haley would act up almost every once in a while, so it would be fine as long as he was locked up for a period of time to calm down his mania. Arnaud thought about how he had stabbed Haley's palm with a knife in the classroom last time. After that, it reminded Haley of the bad things back then. The impact on him was too great, so it was not particularly strange that he needed some time to calm down. Therefore, he said to Boston on the other end of the phone, "Continue to lock him up. It's not the first time anyway. Wait until he calms down." On the other end of the phone, Boston responded casually and then suddenly said, "Boss, are we really not selling medicine recently? Our brothers have been spending a lot recently, and we can't hold on to the remaining money. Do you think?" I said, "Don't sell it for the time being." Arnaud frowned, but he knew that to control Boston and the others, he could not blindly use high-pressure policies, so he promised, "I got it. I'll transfer 50,000 yuan to you later. You can take it and share it with your brothers. Spend it sparingly. As long as we get through this period, we won't have to worry about anything in the future. Patience is the key to success." "Got it, Boss Arnold," Big Brother Boston replied weakly. Arnaud then gave a few simple instructions before hanging up the phone. After that, he began to wash up and walked out of the bathroom. At this time, Caroline was carrying a pot of apple pie from the microwave to the table. When she saw Arnaud coming out, she smiled and said, I made this according to the recipe. I don't know if it tastes good. Come and try it. Arnaud looked at the flower still stuck to Caroline's nose, smiled, and walked over. Okay. Arnaud narrowed his eyes as he looked at Caroline, who was cutting the apple pie with a knife. He was a little unclear about what happened between Caroline and Haley when he was pretending to be him, but he could clearly feel that Caroline had a good impression of the identity of Arnaud. Perhaps it was just a temporary emotion that arose when they were going through hardships together, or perhaps it was a means that Caroline used to get better help. Women liked to bind men with emotions. But no matter which it was, Caroline should now be in a state of relying on the identity of Arnaud. Thinking of this, Arnaud picked up a tissue and patted Caroline on the shoulder. While Caroline was still in shock, Arnaud carefully wiped the flour off her nose with a tissue. At this time, the campus broadcast suddenly rang, announcing that the exam scheduled for tomorrow would be temporarily postponed for a day. Instead, they would go to the auditorium to participate in a commemorative event. Arnaud just frowned when he heard that the exam was cancelled. After all, Haley's condition was unstable now, and he hadn't gotten what he wanted from Caroline, so he wasn't in a hurry. However, Caroline was obviously stunned, because she heard the broadcast mention who this commemorative event was held for. Dr. Frankie. The old man who told her about her miserable situation in front of the artificial lake. Is he dead? Caroline, what's wrong with you? Arnaud noticed Caroline's strange behavior and couldn't help but ask curiously. Caroline shook her head. Speaking of which, is this your college? I remember that one of your degrees is in the Department of Mechanical and Electrical Engineering, right? Arnaud nodded helplessly. Yes, I actually have to attend by name. It seems that I have to attend. But it's good to mourn. After all, I've attended Dr. Frankie's classes several times. He is indeed a very talented person. So, you know him? Arnaud said casually. It's just an invitation class. We met in the big class. We know him, but he doesn't know us. Let's not talk about this. Let me have a taste. It's getting cold. Chapter 858. Smoke and Alcohol, Noise and Excitement. Amid the revelry, Boston Bro moved the poker cards in his hand little by little. It was a simple poker game called Baccarat, which was also the most popular game among gamblers. The dealer wins. However, following the dealer's merciless judgment, Boston Bro had no choice but to sweep away the poker cards in front of him in a discouraged manner. After throwing away his last chip, he left in a huff. Without a doubt, not only did he not win anything tonight, he even lost everything, including the $50,000 that Boss Arnold had just transferred to him. *T. Boston Bro punched the wall next to him, feeling extremely irritated. Now, he was penniless. Boston Bro quickly left the private casino, but when he left the alley, he encountered the scene of people from other gangs peddling drugs. Boston's appearance immediately made the two men from the vendors nervous and fierce. As for the customer who bought the drugs, he panicked and ran away at once. Hey, don't be nervous. I'm just passing by. Boston raised his hands slightly. Friend, you just ruined our business. Do you know how much we lost? One of the men sneered. Boston's eyes narrowed, but he saw a small sealed bag on the ground. It was the strange blue powder left on the ground by the person who ran away in a panic. Boston could only curse his bad luck. He knew what these two fellows were selling here, because he was also one of the sellers of this kind of medicine. However, because of Arnold's prohibition, he didn't sell much of the batch of goods he had obtained back then. In a situation of 2 against 1, the two men obviously did not intend to chat with Boston. They came up and beat him up fiercely. However, Boston was the best fighter in his gang. Otherwise, he would not have been the big brother of the gang before Arnold's arrival. After paying a price, Boston successfully beat the two guys to the ground, the kind that couldn't get up from the ground. Boston wiped the corner of his mouth. It was damaged and there was blood flowing out. Boston fiercely spat a mouthful of saliva on one of them. Seeing the two fellows fall to the ground and unable to get up, Poston suddenly had an evil thought. He directly looted all the money on these two people, including the medicine that was being transported out to be sold. Only then did he quickly leave, walking out of the alley in a few steps. However, just as he walked out of the alley, he quickly rushed back in the next moment. Without a doubt, Boston was a very cruel and bold guy, so he chose to silence them. A ferocious look kept flashing in Boston's eyes. He quickly dragged the two unconscious men out of the alley. Then, he drove the car that was parked nearby. At the back of the car there were a few big bags, hemp rope, and other tools in the alley. He tied them up, put them in the bags, and then drove away. Boston familiarly came to a riverside, then put the bags into the river, and finally pushed the bags into the river. After doing all this, Boston was already drenched. He panted and looked around. Because it was already late at night, there should be no one nearby. Boston took a last look at the clock tower across the river. This was a building on the university campus, the university where Arnold studied. Boston quickly left this place. Before returning to his nest, he counted the money he got from the robbery. It was not a small amount, more than 100,000 yuan. Boston could not help but laugh happily. In this way, not only could he make up for Arnold's 50,000 yuan, but he also made a lot of money. Boston was secretly happy, and at the same time, he picked up the drugs that were also robbed, bath salts. Boston picked up a small bag of bath salts and looked at it again and again. Suddenly, a thought came to his mind. These things are so valuable. Why not sell them now? Boston's gaze gradually changed. He held the money he got from the robbery with both hands, and this batch of bath salts. He knew that there were more of these things in his nest. I should have sold them. T. Arnold. Boston suddenly felt that he had figured it out. We dearly miss Dr. Frankie. He was so outstanding. In an auditorium of the university, a middle-aged man was giving a speech with a heavy tone. On the curtain of the auditorium stage, Dr. Frankie's life was being played by a projector. In the corner of the second floor of the auditorium, there was a sudden voice. Of course, it was not the voice that attracted the attention of everyone present, but just a low voice of conversation. Oh, I hate this kind of formality. The speaker was wearing a hat and sunglasses, and even wrapped his chin with a scarf in the hot weather. Only some parts of his face could be seen, but there was no doubt that this person was an old man. And the one standing beside him was Mr. Orphy. At this time, facing the complaint of the speaker, Mr. Orphy could only helplessly say, "This is spontaneous. To be honest, even I have no way to refuse it. You will never know how it feels to see a group of people mourning for you." He pointed at the picture on the screen. "I'm standing right here." "Father." Mr. Orphy wanted to say something. But Dr. Frankie waved his hand and shook his head. "I'm not so weak that I need you to comfort me. I'm not sick now, so you don't have to explain anything to me." As he said, Dr. Frankie sighed with mixed feelings, with a bit of self-mockery. "It's quite funny. I've been dealing with science all my life. If I had to choose a religion, it would definitely be physics. But I didn't expect that in the end. I'm still alive because of unnatural forces. Now, even if I'm sober and rational, I still can't accept the change in my worldview. Orphy, maybe you did something very wrong." Mr. Orphy did not answer, but just looked at the screen in front of him. The students and teachers were reviewing Dr. Frankie's life, and he was also reviewing his and his father's life. Mr. Orphy suddenly said, "I don't regret it." Dr. Frankie's body trembled slightly, and he didn't say anything. After a while, Dr. Frankie shook his head. The reason why he came here was to retrieve some things that were full of memories for Dr. Frankie from the school office. Of course, these things were relics in the eyes of outsiders, so it was most appropriate for Mr. Orphy to come here. After coming back from death, Dr. Frankie also felt a lot of emotions. At this time, he also wanted to come back to the place where he started, because he knew that in the future, he probably wouldn't have many opportunities to act outside. After all, whether in the eyes of the law or the public, he had been defined as a dead man. Let's go. I have to go back to that messenger before sunset, right? I suddenly feel like I'm being kept in captivity. Father, please bear with it. I'll definitely find a solution. Mr. Orphy hurriedly said. Dr. Frankie shook his head, then put away his nostalgia for this place and turned to leave. But after taking 2 steps, he stopped and looked at a side door of the auditorium. A figure quietly opened the door and walked in with a white rose in his hand. Mr. Orphy's eyes were very sharp. At this time, he came forward and asked, "What's the matter?" Dr. Frankie hesitated for a moment and suddenly said, "Orphy, I know this child. She may have some troubles. If there's a chance, can you help her?" "Father." Mr. Orphy was a little puzzled. Dr. Frankie smiled casually and said, "Just take it as a gift in return, although I didn't get to eat that piece of chocolate. We are in great grief." The broadcast was very loud, and when Caroline slowly pushed open the door and walked in, she almost got ringing in her ears. She looked at the photo of Dr. Frankie on the screen, and there was an inexplicable sadness and irritation in her heart. Not long ago, she did pour out her troubles with this old man who was mourned by everyone. There was no consolation, no conclusion. It was just venting. Perhaps, if she had done something at that time, this old man wouldn't have died. Just like the mother and her baby that she saved. But what could she do? Arnaud should be sitting somewhere in this auditorium. Because Arnaud installed a GPS on her mobile phone, Caroline didn't bring her mobile phone with her when she came out. The purpose of coming here this time was clear to Caroline herself. She just suddenly wanted to offer a white rose to this old man whom she had met once. Maybe it's just a thought of self-satisfaction. She didn't know, and at the same time, she didn't want to stay here for too long. So after listening to a few words of speech, Caroline quietly put the white rose in her hand on the ground and then left quietly. She didn't know if she would meet 403 on the way. She always felt that 403 had been observing her in the dark. If she could meet 403, that would be the best because she suddenly had a question in her heart. She wanted to ask 403 about Arnaud. But at this moment, a voice suddenly came from behind Caroline. It was a man's voice. The one in front, "Wait a minute." Then he quickly walked up and came to Caroline. It was Mr. Orphy. "Please wait a minute, student." Caroline saw Mr. Orphy's face clearly. She was slightly taken aback and said subconsciously, "Are you his son?" The moment she touched Dr. Frankie, she saw the moment of Dr. Frankie's death. She also saw the 2 people standing next to Dr. Frankie at that time, an adult and a child. The adult's appearance completely overlapped with the man who stopped her now. "You know me." Mr. Orphy couldn't help but frown. Caroline didn't know how to explain it. In fact, as a sex worker in the slums, she didn't care about any national affairs. Among the government officials, the most familiar one was probably the current president. "And I've heard of you," Caroline said casually. She felt that such words wouldn't pass. Unexpectedly, Mr. Orphy didn't say anything and just nodded. Because Mr. Orphy almost instantly found a reason that he thought was reasonable. Whether it was him or Dr. Frankie, they were both public figures, and they were very famous. It was not surprising that the public knew about them. What's more, this was the person that his father said to take care of. "Student, do you know my father?" Mr. Orphy smiled. "I saw the white roses you put down." Caroline shook her head. "In fact, we just met once and chatted for a while. I'm not afraid of being laughed at by you. At that time, I didn't know that such a bad old man would be such a famous person." Mr. Orphy frowned. Anyone who heard others say that their father was a bad old man would probably feel uncomfortable, but he didn't say anything. Then he quickly took out a card and handed it to Caroline. "This is—" Caroline was a little puzzled. Mr. Orphy said, "Consider it as a thank you. Thank you for the flowers you sent him." My personal assistant's phone number is on it. If you have any difficulties in the future, you can call this number directly. Just say Southern Cross and he will know what to do. Generally, if it's not a big problem, he should be able to solve it. Since Dr. Frankie is such a famous person, his son should also have a good background, right? Caroline nodded subconsciously. She just didn't know if this guy could help her settle the crime of being a suspect in the Rivia murder case. It shouldn't be. After all, it's a human life. After Mr. Orphy left a card, he quickly left without saying anything to Caroline. Although he only left his secretary's phone number, it was enough to solve many things. For Mr. Orphy, this was just a small matter to fulfill his father's instructions. Ridiculous. Caroline shook her head and put the card into her pocket. Just as she was about to leave, she saw a woman quietly walk out not far away. Then, after the woman walked out, Caroline saw Arnaud walk out as well. Arnold was talking to this woman about something, but Caroline suddenly gasped at this time. She had seen this woman before. It was Lucas' girlfriend in the photo. The distance was too far. Caroline couldn't hear what the two were talking about, but there was no doubt that this Arnold knew Lucas' girlfriend. However, when he came out of the masquerade party last time, Arnold didn't show any signs of knowing Lucas' girlfriend at all. It's just an invitation class. We met in class. We know him, but he doesn't know us. Haley was just replacing Arnold in campus activities. He wasn't a top student at all. He didn't know how to teach at all. Caroline's heart suddenly beat fast. This Arnold is the real Arnold. When did he switch again? Before the memorial service? Or earlier? Yesterday? The day before yesterday? These few days? Caroline retreated slowly and cautiously, afraid that she would make a sound and attract Arnold's attention. She turned a corner and then ran away like crazy. She left the auditorium and ran completely out of the place where the auditorium was located. However, as she ran in a hurry, her heart beat faster as if it was about to jump out. She even heard her own violent heartbeat. But Caroline suddenly bumped into something and had to stop. It was 403. He really followed me. Why are you looking for me in such a hurry? 403 reached out to pull up Caroline, who had fallen to the ground, and asked, "Why are you so flustered?" The moment Caroline's hand touched 403, a flash of light occupied her vision. It was dark all around. Boston. Big bag. Something was being dragged. By the river. Chapter 859. Caroline retracted her hand at lightning speed, so 403 didn't really grab it. 403 felt very surprised. Caroline seemed to be afraid of something. Perhaps it was his current terrifying appearance. 403 had long been accustomed to his current appearance, so he didn't show any anger. He just said indifferently, "Get up. Let's talk aside. There are too many people here." Caroline grabbed her palm, stood up with her head down, and hurriedly walked past 403. She didn't look back at 403's appearance. She didn't know what 403's gaze was like at this time. Was it sizing her up, staring, or pondering? Was it good or bad? Caroline wasn't even sure if what she saw was 403's future, but she saw the appearance of Brother Boston. Their fates were intertwined. For 03, do you know that the current Arnold is the real Arnold? If he knew it early, why didn't he remind me? Suddenly, Caroline remembered what Nia said, "Don't trust anyone easily." Caroline suddenly had the idea of retreating. So behind the teaching building, Caroline directly said what she meant. "I don't want to continue. I just want to leave. I don't want to continue such dangerous things." 403 was silent for a moment and shook his head. "Caroline, I thought you were a persevering person, but you let me down." Caroline was amused. "Is that so? Then I'm sorry. But I've always disappointed people since I was a child. I've long been used to it. In the end, you're just doing it for your own revenge. I don't know what kind of revenge you want to be satisfied with, but please don't drag me into it. I'm just an ordinary person." I said that after this matter is over, I will come out to help you testify that the person who killed Livia is highly and clear your name. 403 said slowly, if you leave, I'm sorry. You will always bear the crime of murder. If you're lucky, maybe you can hide for a lifetime. If you're unlucky, I think you can imagine it yourself. You would rather have nothing? Caroline's body stiffened. 403 walked closer at this time and said softly, 2 more days. After 2 more days, you can go out openly and restore your previous life or start a new life. Caroline subconsciously clenched her fist. She looked up, stared at 403 and asked, You've been there all along? If I am in danger, will you appear? As long as you do as I say, you won't be in danger. 403 said indifferently, Remember, without you, I will still carry out my revenge. And without my help, you will be a fugitive for the rest of your life. With that said, 403 took out a folded piece of paper from his clothes and slowly opened it in front of Caroline. This is what I picked up outside. I think you will be interested to know. Caroline took the folded paper from 403 in horror. It was a wanted poster with her face printed on it. How could they do this? I'm innocent. Caroline became agitated. 403 shrugged and said, After all, you have been missing for so many days, and the criminal also ran away from the scene under the watchful eyes of the public, right? 2 days, just 2 days. Are you sure you don't want to try harder? What do you want me to do? Caroline crumpled the wanted poster in her hand into a ball and asked while gritting her teeth. Tonight, I want you to have sex with him. 403 picked up a strand of Caroline's hair and looked at it carefully like a demon with burned skin. He whispered in Caroline's ear, I think this should be a very easy thing for you. Just 2 days, when Poston returned to his nest, there were not many people here. Only 2 of his men were watching the live broadcast of the football game in boredom. Where's Haley? Poston asked casually. One of them drank a beer and said, Oh, is he asleep? He just went crazy and smashed something again. There is nothing to smash inside. Poston nodded, then his eyes turned. He took out a stack of banknotes, counted some out, and threw it on the table. I am hungry. Go buy some food. Oh, bring me back to the woman. I will watch over here. The 2 men saw that Poston was generous. After deducting the expenses, there was still a lot of money left. They were overjoyed and quickly put on their shoes and went out. After Poston saw the 2 men leave, he quickly closed the lock and walked to a room in the house. Only Arnold had the key to open the door. But the lock couldn't prevent people who wanted to open the door. Poston licked his lips, took out a bunch of tools from his trouser pocket, and easily opened the door. Poston knew the secret of the safe very well. It contained the bath salts obtained from the mysterious woman this time. When Poston saw that all the goods were here, his eyes suddenly became fiery. If this batch of goods could be sold, he would have enough capital. He didn't need to rely on anyone. As long as he had money in hand, he wouldn't be afraid of not having enough soldiers and food. Poston quickly put all the bath salts into a duffel bag and took a pistol that was in the safe with him. Just as he was about to leave, he heard the sound of smashing coming from the next room and Haley's crazy roar. This was a lunatic who would act up every few days. It was said that he had serious violent tendencies. Poston had already planned to take the batch of bath salts in his hand and wanted to do it alone. At this time, he made up his mind and walked to the door of Haley's room. You want to go out? Poston slammed the door panel hard, attracting Haley's attention inside. You want to go out, don't you? I can take you to find Boss Arnold. In the room, it suddenly became quiet. In the room, Haley's eyes were wide open like a wild beast. There were a lot of photo fragments at his feet. In the past few days, there was always a mysterious guy who would come with intimate photos of Caroline and Arnold every time. The mysterious man didn't speak. Every time, he left quietly after leaving the photos, which made Haley more and more unable to control himself. He felt that he was going crazy and was very eager to leave this place. I can take you to find your brother, but you have to be quiet and listen to me. Poston's voice sounded a little low through the door. Otherwise, I can shoot your head off at any time. Let me out. In the end, Caroline returned to dormitory 403 before Arnold. But she didn't really intend to have sex with Arnold, as dormitory 403 said, although the so-called concept of chastity was much cheaper than a piece of bread in the eyes of people like her. It was just that only dormitory 403 could prove her innocence. She had to pretend to agree. She needed some time to find a way out. Caroline subconsciously thought of the business card given to her by Dr. Frankie's son. Caroline didn't care too much at first, but at this time, she thought that she had to try anyway. Anyway, it wouldn't do her any harm. But she couldn't use the phone Arnold gave her to make this call. So after returning to dormitory 403, Caroline quickly walked out. There was a public phone booth under the dormitory building. Caroline walked straight into the phone booth and dialed the number on the card. Hello, Bolton Logistics Transportation Company. How can I help you? A woman's voice came from the other end of the phone. Caroline was stunned. She glanced at the number she dialed and found that she didn't dial the wrong number. But why was it a transportation company? Hello, if there's no problem, please allow me to hang up. The woman who answered the phone said quickly. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Caroline took a deep breath, recalling the details of the conversation with Dr. Frankie's son. Her heart moved. Southern Cross Star. The phone suddenly went silent, but it didn't hang up. While Caroline was waiting anxiously, the voice of the receptionist sounded again. Your commission has been accepted. I'll now transfer it for you. Please wait a moment. Caroline was stunned. After waiting for a while, a man's voice sounded from the other end of the phone. Hello, how can I help you? Caroline hurriedly said, Someone asked me to make this call. He's Dr. Frankie's son. He told me. Caroline's words were instantly interrupted by the man on the other end of the phone. He said indifferently, Miss, you just have to say what you need help with. Caroline gritted her teeth. Listen, I'm now involved in a troublesome matter. I've been framed as a suspect in a murder case. The person who framed me is called Haley. And Arnold, they are brothers. Now the police are looking for me. I'm in a very dangerous situation. What's your name? The man asked quickly. Caroline. Caroline Swift. Understood. We'll solve your problem for you as soon as possible. The man said quickly, Please wait at ease. It won't take more than 1 day. Wait a minute, I haven't finished. Caroline called a few words into the phone, but the phone was hung up. When Caroline called this number again, she found that the number she dialed was no longer in service. Caroline helplessly hung up the phone. Obviously, the tone of the man who answered the phone later was a little perfunctory. Just wait for 1 day? Caroline couldn't help but shake her head. If it was that magical shop, it was probably possible. But she couldn't find that magical shop anymore. She had to return to room 403 again in a daze and try another idea. She went to the bathroom and looked at herself in the mirror. She had seen some things that would happen in the future several times, and several of them had come true. The mother pushing the stroller, Dr. Frankie, and the time in the restaurant. There were 3 other times. One time, she saw herself being caught, stuffed with something in her mouth, and then became extremely painful. Another time, she saw a scene in a forest. She still couldn't tell whether it was Arnold or Haley's man who was stabbed in the chest with a knife. Another time, it happened just now. When she met room 403, the scene related to Boston happened by the river. Because they were too scattered and fragmented, Caroline could not find any clues from them. But after recalling the few strange perspectives she had entered, she realized something. 2 of them appeared when her heart was beating faster. Does that mean that if I'm extremely nervous and my heart is beating faster, I can activate this ability? The more Caroline thought about it, the more she felt it was feasible. So, she began to speed up her blood circulation. The best way to speed up her heart rate was naturally to exercise. However, she spent nearly half an hour sweating and panting like a cow, but she got nothing. In the end, Caroline was exhausted and lay on the sofa. Because she was too tired, Caroline didn't even want to move her hands and feet. She just lay there and listened quietly to the sound of her heartbeat. There was no one else in room 403 except her. It was terribly quiet at this time. Caroline stared blankly out the window and suddenly became calm. In a trance, some images flashed through her eyes. She didn't deliberately capture these images. Her mind and consciousness fell into a strange state at this time. Caroline didn't know what this was, but she subconsciously didn't want to get out of this state. What she didn't know was that the air around her was slightly distorted at this time, like ripples. At this time, on the roof of the dormitory building, where room 403 was located, two figures slowly descended, the golden Wolfgang and the gray-robed Noah. They had returned from the dimensional gap again since the last time they used the Book of Space's time image in the basement of the bar. Lucifer's whereabouts were a mystery, but Noah didn't come up empty-handed. This is the source of the interference? Wolfgang frowned at this time and looked thoughtfully at the bottom of the dormitory building. He couldn't help but say, "She's just an ordinary person, and even not pure. She's not a specific witch. What does it matter if she's pure or not?" Noah said indifferently, "The purity of the body is far inferior to the purity of the soul." Wolfgang shrugged and said, "I still prefer those with pure bodies. But what's her background?" After a moment of silence, Noah said slowly, "She's a dimension observer. She's awakening. Her life form is transforming." "Isn't this the same as you?" The Lord's world actually allowed the existence of the dimension observer bloodline. Child of taboo. Wolfgang opened his mouth. The dimension observer was a top-notch bloodline among the many different Earth. It was extremely rare, and there might not be one born in a world. Furthermore, before and after awakening, they were completely different individual lifeforms. Only after fully awakening could they transform into another life form. Chapter 860. Suddenly, there was a roar in the sky. Out of nowhere, a bolt of lightning flashed across the night sky. The zigzagging lightning had no path to follow, but it had a destination, and the destination was his statue on Mount Cristo. He opened his hands, lowered his head slightly, and looked at the world from above, as if to say one thing: God loved the world. However, the lightning came to his side and fell on his body. In fact, as early as 14 years ago, this statue had been struck by lightning, and the statue was damaged at that time. It was only later that the statue was repaired. Therefore, it was not inconceivable that his statue was struck by lightning again. At least, at this time of the night, there were no tourists around, and at least there would not be any casualties. However, a sudden gust of wind blew in the vicinity, accompanied by the roar of lightning. All of a sudden, the caretaker was awakened from his dream. The caretaker quickly put on his shoes and ran forward. If the statue was damaged by lightning, he had to inform someone to repair it as soon as possible. There was still a long way to go before reaching the statue. Although the caretaker had rushed to the scene as soon as possible, he still could not reach the scene. Therefore, he did miss something. At this time, in front of the statue, in the center of the two huge arms, the lightning from the sky suddenly gathered and turned into a flashing ball. In the ball, there seemed to be something brewing. A few light spots were expanding in the ball. Suddenly, the ball of lightning cracked like a bubble, and the light that was brewing in the middle had expanded into a ball of light that was as tall as a person, and slowly landed under the base of the huge statue. There were 3 figures in total. They looked human and had blonde hair. 2 of them were wearing silver armor, holding long halberds, and had wings on their backs. The one in the lead was wearing plain clothes and straw shoes, but it was spotless. His skin was as white as snow, and he was as beautiful as a woman. His eyes were shining like stars. Furthermore, it had 3 pairs of exceptionally soft and beautiful white wings. "Why are you in such a hurry to come to the main world?" one of the silver armor suddenly asked. The one wearing plain clothes and straw shoes said indifferently, "This is Father's idea. He wants us to bring the sinner, Noah, back. If we succeed, we have to go to a place and do something." "Noah? He is here?" another silver armor suddenly exclaimed. "I don't know, but Father suddenly gave me a revelation and told me the coordinates of this place." But at this moment, "An angel?" Behind them, the caretaker who had rushed over was so frightened that he dropped the phone in his hand. The unbelievably beautiful 6-winged angel in plain clothes and straw shoes left the ground and slowly floated towards the caretaker. "Oh my God! Am I seeing things?" The caretaker felt that his worldview was rapidly collapsing until the 6-winged angel arrived and floated in front of him. He could feel the warmth coming from the gentle radiance coming from the other party's body. The solemn feeling made the caretaker feel an unprecedented sense of reverence. He asked blankly, "Who are you?" "Gabriel." As it spoke, it slowly placed its hand on the caretaker's forehead. In an instant, the caretaker fainted in shock. Gabriel withdrew its hand and pointed at the spot between its eyebrows. Then, it flicked 2 faint beams of light toward the 2 silver-armored angels and shot them into the spots between their eyebrows. "We haven't walked in the human world for a long time. The world is changing every day, and the pollution is serious. Familiarize yourself with this memory as soon as possible so that we can take action," Gabriel said calmly. "At this moment there are so many unpleasant smells. There is the aura of hell here." One of the silver-armored angels suddenly frowned. "They are demons." Gabriel looked somewhere. Through the layers of obstacles, his eyes swept across the large city at the foot of Monte Cristo. "Let's not care about these demons. The most important thing now is to capture Noah." Therefore, they quickly retracted their wings and silver armor, and with a mysterious power, turned into clothes that were in line with the current trends. However, their figures were too perfect, as if they had been sculpted, but they looked like international models walking on the runway. Some old cars were parked at the side gate of the university campus, which was closer to the entrance of the dormitory area. In the car, Boston glanced at Haley, who was trembling. Of course, he knew that this guy was not trembling because of fear. On the contrary, Haley was trembling because he couldn't suppress the anger in his heart. This freak with a powerful violent gene hidden in his body. Boston sneered at this moment. He quietly pressed down on the hidden pistol with one hand and placed a small knife on Haley's leg with the other. He then sneered in Haley's ear, "Go. The guy who has been using you as a substitute, controlling you, threatening you, and treating you as a puppet, he's here." Haley slowly moved his eyes and stared at Boston. His eyes were bloodshot, looking like a person who couldn't sleep peacefully. He abruptly picked up the knife. At this moment, Boston was a little nervous, and his palm that was secretly holding the pistol had a layer of sweat on it. At this moment, Haley silently pushed open the car door and walked out. Boston heaved a sigh of relief. To be honest, he was frightened by Haley's terrifying gaze, but Boston soon calmed down. He quickly grabbed his car keys and followed her. It would be best if these 2 brothers could kill each other. Actually, Boston's idea was very simple. He wanted Haley to kill Arnold. If someone did it for him, the crime would be shouldered by someone else, and the police wouldn't be able to find him. Then, he would be free in the future. Why not? Of course, he still followed because he wasn't sure if Haley could succeed. Otherwise, he would have to do it himself. Arnold came back a little late. After the memorial service, a tutor from the university came to him and discussed many things with him. As an outstanding graduate, the tutor was very willing to help Arnold in all aspects. Arnold didn't become impatient. After discussing various future developments with the tutor in detail, he thanked him and left. When they returned to the male dormitory building, The dormitory administrator pretended that nothing had happened as he walked past Anno and secretly slipped a note to Anno. When he went up the stairs, Arnold opened it and glanced at it. There were 2 simple lines on it. The woman in dormitory 403 went out twice. The second time, she made a call from the phone booth. Arnold narrowed his eyes. Then, he quickly tore up the note and threw it into the trash can by the stairs. Arnold paused for a few seconds in front of the door of room 403. After putting on a smile, he opened the door and entered. He heard the sound of water coming from the bathroom. Arnold glanced at it and walked around the dormitory. He came to the table and picked up the mobile phone he gave to Caroline. He quickly opened it and saw that the tracker was still inside. Then, he quickly put the phone away, sat down, and turned on the TV. At this time, Caroline finished showering and came out of the bathroom. She was only wearing a small tank top and shorts, and her hair was still wet. When she saw Arnold suddenly appear, Caroline was a little startled. "When did you come back?" Arnold smiled and said, "Just now. Seeing that you were inside, I didn't call you." "Well, you usually don't take a shower so early." Caroline shrugged, took out a bottle of beer from the refrigerator, and drank it. She said casually, "I just did some exercise out of boredom, and I'm a little sweaty. How is it? Did anything happen in the auditorium?" "What happened?" Arnold still looked at Caroline with a smile. Caroline nodded and leaned against the refrigerator door. She didn't get close. "Well, it's good that nothing happened. By the way, do you want to eat something? I'll make it for you." "I ate on the way back." Arnold shook his head. Caroline nodded again. She suddenly remembered the words of dormitory 403. At this time, she secretly gritted her teeth and walked toward Arnold. She walked up to Arnold and casually placed the beer bottle on the table. She stretched out her finger and gently stroked Arnold's cheek. Some small movements between men and women could easily convey the message of what they wanted to do next. Arnold didn't speak. He just closed his eyes and felt the touch from Caroline's fingers. He had no opinion on what would happen next. If a further relationship with Caroline could make it easier for her to reveal her hidden secrets, then he didn't mind having a night with her. Of course, he could use violent means to coerce her. However, in Arnold's view, such means were too low-level. A one-time interrogation might get the answer he wanted, but he might also be confused by the other party. Because you would never know if a person who was hiding fear and hatred towards you would tell you the truth. It was more in line with the actions of a person with hatred to drag the other person down with them before they died. "Has anyone ever told you that you are really charming?" Arnold slowly opened his eyes, pressed his palm on the back of Caroline's hand, and breathed on her fingers. Caroline took Arnold's head, inserted her fingers into his hair, and gently massaged it. "There are still some things left unfinished last time. Is that so?" Arnold narrowed his eyes and stuck to Caroline's lower abdomen. He could roughly guess what was left unfinished last time because he knew Haley's special hobby very well. It was not particularly strange that Haley would have feelings for Caroline. They began to make love gently. Caroline pushed Arnaud onto the sofa. At this time, Arnaud reached out to untie Caroline's clothes, but Caroline grabbed his hands and put them on her chest. She bit her teeth and said, "Let me do it." This was a very seductive scene. "Your heart is beating so fast." Arnold chuckled. Caroline smiled slightly and began to lean down. Her left hand began to touch Arnold's clothes from his waist, moving all the way to his chest. At the same time, her other hand reached into the gap of the sofa. She whispered in Arnold's ear, "I think you are too tired." "Enjoy it." Arnaud heaved a sigh of relief as he felt Caroline's fingers rhythmically touching his skin. It was an indescribable feeling of comfort. However, a sudden stinging sensation made Arnaud widen his eyes in horror. There was even a kind of disbelief in his horror. With a violent twitch of his body, Arnold fainted. Caroline straightened up at this time and reached out to pat Arnold's face. She was relieved when she found that he did not move at all. She looked at the taser in her hand that she quietly took out from the gap of the sofa for a few seconds. She listened to the crackling sound of the electric current and suddenly shuddered. Then, she quickly turned off the taser and stuffed it directly into her cleavage. The taser given to her by 403 was just the right size. After electrocuting Arnold, Caroline stood up, wiped her face, and parted her hair a little. She didn't follow the instructions of 403. Electrocuting Arnold was just an impromptu idea, but she didn't expect to succeed so quickly. At the thought of Arnold waking up, Caroline shuddered again. She quickly took a bag and stuffed some things that were naturally useful to her. "Are you kidding me? I'm not going to continue playing with you lunatics," Caroline cursed as she stuffed her food. "Did I offend you? From that day on, there has been no peace at all. What does Boss Neymar's death have to do with me? Why are you looking for me? You can kill Livia, but why do you want to frame me? I've had enough. F***CKU. Speaking of which, Caroline turned around and punched and kicked the unconscious Arnaud. After venting her anger, Caroline took a deep breath and began to check Arnold's clothes. Of course, it was easy for her to find Arnold's wallet. After slapping Arnold again, Caroline opened the wallet. "Take these as some interest for me." She was penniless now. Although the money in Arnold's wallet was not much, at least she could still buy a bus ticket or something. Caroline had made up her mind to stay away from this place tonight. God knows when that lunatic Haley will suddenly switch with Arnold again? God knows if 403 can protect me? God knows when the scene in my foresight will come true. Caroline decided not to continue playing this dangerous game. So be it. It's better to be a wanted criminal than to die. "I'm going to." Caroline suddenly stopped her outburst of muttering because she saw something in Arnold's wallet, the huge bank card she had lost. After going around in circles, the bank card finally returned to her hand. Caroline's eyes suddenly lit up. She directly put the bank card on her mouth and kissed it heavily. "You're the best." Outside the window, two transcendents were quietly watching this happen. It was not until the moment Caroline kissed the bank card that Wolfgang could not help but frown. God, why does such a vulgar woman have the bloodline of the Latitude Observer? I feel the malice of the world's will towards me. But Wolfgang quickly realized that something was wrong. He then looked at Noah beside him and said, "Oh, I mean, malice towards you. The Creator is imperfect." Noah responded in a calm voice, "Even for us. You see her stupidity, greed, and ignorance. Are you also looking at yourself? It's because you can always see things you don't like in her, just like yourself at some point in time. That's why you loathe her, don't you? Just like how you loathe yourself at some point in time and are always so impatient." Wolfgang shrugged and said, "Humans? By the way, anyway, this is your designated bride. Why don't you take her away now?" Noah shook his head and said, "The Observer's awakening is very sensitive. Any external intervention may cause the awakening to fail. So, we just need to wait quietly and let her follow the established path. Fate will guide her. What if it fails?" Wolfgang, on the other hand, held a different opinion. "How do you know that external interference will definitely lead to failure, instead of prompting?" Chapter 861. Feeling something cold dripping on his face, Arnold opened his eyes at once and then gasped for breath. Like a drowning person who had just woken up, he greedily swallowed the air around him. "God, boss, you're finally awake." The voice Arnold heard came from the dormitory's administrator, the guy who secretly worked for him. "I saw the lady leave in a hurry, but I didn't see you, so I planned to come to the dormitory to take a look, but I found you fainted on the sofa." The administrator quickly told him what happened after Arnold fainted. Arnold subconsciously touched his neck. Based on the fragmentary memories he had before he fainted, he could tell that he had fainted because of the electric shock. Arnold looked around the dormitory. He suddenly remembered something and touched his body. Finally, he found his wallet under the sofa. The money in it was gone, and the other more important thing was obviously gone as well. "Boss, I didn't take your money," the administrator quickly explained. Arnold suddenly threw his wallet out and grabbed the administrator's collar with one hand. He widened his eyes and looked like he wanted to bite the administrator. "Where did she go?" "She went in the direction of the south gate." "Maybe she left?" the administrator quickly said. "How long?" About 7 or 8 minutes." Arnold pushed the administrator away and rushed out of the door, ignoring the administrator's call. The university was a place where there were many people, but at the same time, it was also a place where there were no people, so the surroundings would become very empty, so empty that it made people feel lonely. Among the huge buildings, it seemed that one could always find a place to hide, and no one would come. For example, the teaching building area where there were no classes and the lights were turned off. The south gate was the fastest exit. Caroline, who had decided to leave like this, lowered her head and looked hurried. Since the bank card had returned to her, Caroline felt that she had the confidence to avoid all this. Probably fate always liked to play tricks on her. Caroline suddenly felt ridiculous because she still couldn't understand why she always encountered bad things one after another, just as she couldn't understand why she would meet the person she most didn't want to meet at this time. Yes, after fortunately regaining her wealth and seeing that she was about to leave this troublesome place, in front of the door leading to a new life, Caroline met the guy who brought her all the trouble and misfortune. Livia's murderer, Haley. At this time, Caroline could finally clearly distinguish the two brothers, and she could no longer guess who the person in front of her was, because Arnold had been electrocuted in the dormitory. There was no time to think about why Haley came back at this time. The moment Haley appeared, Caroline had the idea of escaping, because Haley's appearance at this moment was so frightening. His eyes were filled with ruthlessness and his face was so ferocious. It was as if there was a demon living in his body. Such a terrifying person. Livia had died at the hands of such a terrifying person. Caroline. Haley tilted his head and slowly spat out a word from left to right. It sounded like a question, a low growl, and an unquestionable command. "Where are you going?" "Where?" "Nothing, just walking around. I'm going back." Sensing that Haley's state was a little abnormal at this time, Caroline hurriedly said, turned around, and left in front of Haley's eyes. She held the bag in her hand tightly and didn't dare to look back. She walked faster and faster. Finally, she ran desperately just to get away from the sight of this demon-like man. "Caroline!" Haley roared like a wild beast and chased after them frantically like a cheetah. He ran far away in an instant, causing Boston, who was tailing him from a distance, to become angry out of humiliation. "Damn, this freak!" Boston was so angry that he kicked the trash can next to him. Haley should have rushed directly to find Arnold. Why did he chase after this B***tch? Boston spat on the ground. Just as he was about to give chase, a voice that made him feel apprehensive came from the side of the road. It was Arnold. Arnold flipped over the side guardrail with a few leaves on his body. He took a shortcut all the way to the south gate exit. He guessed that Caroline was not familiar with the various passages in the university park and could only take the main road, so he tried to intercept her as much as possible. "Boston, why are you here?" Arnold stepped forward and stared at Boston. Boston subconsciously wanted to pull out his pistol. Maybe it was a good choice to kill Arnold here. But this was too stupid, especially shooting in this place. The gunshot was bound to attract the guards in the university. Moreover, looking at Arnold's flustered and exasperated appearance, and the scene of Caroline and Haley meeting, Boston's intuition told him that Arnold was hiding something from him. Boston's heart skipped a beat and he quickly lied. "I'm sorry, boss. Haley escaped from his lair when I went out to buy food. I saw that he was completely crazy and said he wanted to deal with you, so I chased after him." "What? You let him out?" Arnold grabbed Boston's collar with one hand and said angrily, "How could you?" I'm sorry." Boston lowered his head. But he ran over there. And that woman, Caroline, I saw her too. Arnold pushed Boston away and shouted, I'll deal with you when we get back. Come with me. Things. Why couldn't things happen according to the plan? Why couldn't things go as planned? If everything worked as planned, how good would it be? Just like the script, how good would it be? It was so bad that it made people upset, so bad that they couldn't wait to destroy everything and recreate it. They were like spectators, but they had the ability to intervene at any time. It was just that there were countless such things happening in the world. Even at this moment, there were countless of the same things happening in different spacetimes. Wolfgang's 10 fingers moved slightly, and there seemed to be invisible piano keys in the air. The vibrating air produced a rather cheerful rhythm. Emotions can be put into the song. This berserk called Haley is quite interesting, but it's a pity that he's just an ordinary guy. I can't continue with this song. His hands suddenly stopped. Wolfgang looked at Noah and said, Aren't you going to help this woman? She may not be able to avoid the danger. Since there's still a chance to awaken this power in the main world, this little difficulty is nothing, Arnold said indifferently. If she can't get through it, it proves that she's still not allowed to exist in the main world. The hand of the world's will is arranging her ending, so we shouldn't interfere. Wolfgang asked curiously, Didn't you say that she will be your bride? Noah flipped his sleeve. Multiple worlds are common. Every individual is independent of each other, but there is some kind of connection. Since the power of dimensional observation can be born in her in the main world, there is also a chance for it to be born in her in other worlds. Failure here doesn't mean failure in other worlds. I just need to know that it's Caroline, not the Caroline in the main world. Wolfgang shrugged and asked in a vulgar manner, In other words, there are pure ones in other worlds, right? Arnold glanced at Wolfgang indifferently. Just as he was about to speak, he frowned slightly. He lifted his hood in an instant and turned to look behind Wolfgang. Noticing that something was wrong with Noah, Wolfgang also turned around instantly. Behind the two of them, 3 guys with perfect figures had appeared out of nowhere. Their faces were perfect, and their clothes were neutral. It was difficult to determine their gender at first. However, there was an uncomfortable feeling coming from these 3 people that made Wolfgang feel uncomfortable. Wolfgang flipped his blonde wig and was slightly moved. The notes in the wind are a little restless. How dare the music of lust blaspheme the gospel? The beautiful leader stood with his hands behind his back and shook his head slightly. Wolfgang felt as if his fingers were hit by something, and he quickly clenched his fists. A smiling bruise had appeared on his fingertips. Wolfgang could not help but open his mouth in astonishment. He looked at Noah in astonishment, only to see Noah waving his hand to stop Wolfgang. Noah said calmly, Wolfgang, even someone as talented as you wouldn't be able to create such a voice that can be said to be the gospel of mankind. Gabriel's body is surrounded by this gospel, so don't mess with your note. Gabriel. Wolfgang's expression suddenly changed slightly. He instantly looked forward and said solemnly, It is Gabriel, the left of God. Gabriel didn't pay attention to Wolfgang's solemn expression. He floated up and slowly arrived in front of Noah, facing him for a moment. Gabriel suddenly asked, Aren't you going to escape? Noah shook his head and said indifferently, One day, I found myself in heaven in a dream, so I knew I would go back one day. But I don't know the exact time. But I think it might be this time. I hope I don't have to do it. Gabriel nodded. Noah said helplessly, If it were another angel, I think I would consider it. But I didn't expect him to send your true body here. Then, I can't do anything. You're quite rational. Gabriel smiled and said, as expected of the guy who inherited the name of the prophet. Then, come back with me. Can you wait? Noah suddenly said, I'll go back with you. How about tomorrow? Don't make me do it here. Golden light flashed in Gabriel's eyes. Then, there's nothing I can do. Noah waved his hand casually. However, Gabriel seemed to have sensed Noah's movement, and he pressed Noah's hand down even faster than him. Noah smiled and said, I don't plan to leave. But my friend has nothing to do with heaven. You can't just capture him, right? As Noah spoke, Wolfgang's body instantly faded and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Gabriel glanced at Noah in silence and slowly released his hand. He said indifferently, I heard that a group of extraordinary guys gathered in the dimensional crack. They thought they had escaped from this world, but in the end they couldn't even stay in the main world. Don't you think they're lying to themselves? Noah smiled and didn't say anything. Suddenly, he pointed at the starry sky and pointed down. There was a tall mountain in front of him. What do you think is on the other side of the mountain? Gabriel frowned and asked, What is it? Shooting stars, said Noah. How do you know? Asked Gabriel. Noah shook his head and said, Do you want to take a look? You'll know if it's there or not. Gabriel, however, waved his hand. The two angels behind him hurriedly stepped forward. Noah cooperatively stretched out his hands. One of the angels swept across Noah's hands, and Noah's hands were instantly shackled. Take him away, Gabriel shouted in a deep voice. The two angels instantly turned into rays of light. The light spread to Noah's body, and the two angels and Noah's figures gradually faded away. I've been to the other side of the mountain. But I didn't see you there, because you didn't come. Before they disappeared, Noah's voice slowly faded away. After the last barrier disappeared, Gabriel turned around and left. Unlike in the past, angels didn't need to cause any trouble in the main world. Their glory had already shone on the earth, and the world knew them. They could come and go quietly. But Gabriel didn't leave immediately. Instead, he came to the tall bell tower on the university campus. In the bell tower, facing the North Star, Gabriel knelt down and put his hands on his chest. Then, he slowly stood up. Its body suddenly grew a little taller, and its delicate, elf-like face became slightly rougher. It grew some whiskers, and the contours of its face became deeper because of this. Gabriel stood with his hands behind his back. He came to the small aisle outside the bell tower, where he could see the large city in front of him. Gabriel suddenly opened his mouth and murmured, I haven't seen the night for a long time. It's dimmer than before. The pollution has gotten worse over the years. Soft footsteps sounded behind Gabriel. Someone was holding the stairs and slowly climbing up to the mechanism room on the top floor of the bell tower. Finally, she stepped into this place and saw Gabriel, who was overlooking the city. As long as you are willing, heaven can also welcome the night and be as bright as before, she said. Gabriel heaved a sigh of relief. I came here to thank you for telling me Noah's whereabouts. Isn't this one of the services that you bought before, sir? As long as the owner of the Book of Space and the jeweled sword appears in the main world, we'll inform you. For hundreds of years, we've kept your request in mind, she said with a smile. Gabriel slowly turned around and looked at the woman who was walking toward him. She was a maid in a shop that specialized in selling everything. I've always regretted it. Gabriel seemed to recall something. I regret handing over your soul so that heaven can continue to exist. Saint Joan. Customer, my name is Yi. You're wrong. Chapter 862. Gabriel slowly walked into the engine room of the clock tower and circled around Ms. Maid, who was standing there quietly. He exclaimed, No matter how many times I've done it, I'm always amazed by the creativity of human beings. Alchemy is really a subject that is close to the truth. Just this body alone is really a rare treasure. Yi clasped her hands and looked ahead, motionless like a virgin who was practicing etiquette. 4 centuries, dozens of centuries, I've been thinking about the same question. Gabriel stopped in front of Yi and stared into her deep blue eyes, asking slowly, Who are you? Where are you from? What do you want to do? We're doing business, Yi said with a smile. Gabriel shook his head and sighed. I've talked with the Buddhas of the Western Paradise and seen the incredible ruler of the heavenly court. I've been to the end of the Ganges River and asked the ruler of the sky. We don't have a unified conclusion. I don't know your origin. Do you want to know this information? Yu Yi asked with a smile. Gabriel shook his head again. I don't want to increase the cost. After all, there's not much time left before the next payment. Every petitioner is extremely precious to me, and I can't bear to part with them. Gabriel sighed again with a compassionate look. In fact, every time I give them away, I suffer the heart-wrenching pain of a human. Because they are my children. Is he okay? That gentleman has been removed from his position as the owner, Yu Yi said calmly. Now I have a new owner. Gabriel fell silent for a moment. Then he gathered his sleeves and said, Really? Another owner? No wonder you're more active than last time. It's because of the new owner. It's impolite to talk about my owner behind his back, Yu Yi said calmly. Gabriel smiled and suddenly said, There's one thing. A few months ago, a new petitioner was supposed to ascend to heaven, but for some reason, he disappeared. I had an angel descend to investigate this matter. But in the end, even this angel went missing. In the end, we found that an ancient monastery in the human world had been completely destroyed. We only found an inverted cross in the ruins. The inverted cross is the symbol of the Black Order. You should know that. Why do you ask? Gabriel nodded. Something was stolen from the convent, and I have an idea of what it was for. I just don't understand why the petitioner's soul disappeared. Can those who have not ascended to heaven be regarded as petitioners? Miss Maid suddenly asked. Gabriel paced for a while and suddenly looked outside the clock tower, as if he had sensed something. Thank you for showing mercy to Lucifer. She doesn't know much, so it's inevitable that she'll be biased. You two were once siblings, so I hope you can take into account your relationship. That depends on how much she offended my master. The servant girl's voice became calmer. Gabriel shook his head and waved his hand. Let's not talk about this. I can't descend for too long. You should have something else to do here, right? I seem to sense an individual with your aura in the vicinity. It's nothing. I'm just a customer who did business with you, Yu Yi said calmly. My new master likes to follow up with customers. Gabriel didn't say anything more and nodded. When the time comes, I'll visit your new master in person. Thank you for your help this time, which allowed me to successfully capture Noah. Then, please send my regards to the new shop owner. Gabriel slowly closed his eyes. Then, as if something was stripped from his body, he suddenly knelt on the ground, showing a tired posture. At the same time, he returned to his original beautiful appearance. Gabriel slowly propped himself up and looked up and down. He frowned and said, My father asked me to stay away from you and not to have any conflicts with you. Why? Who are you? Miss Maid gently lifted her skirt and paused at Gabriel. Then, she turned around and left with a smile. She only said, Then listen to your father. Gabriel did not move until Miss Maid slowly walked down the stairs. It followed its father's guidance and never did anything against its father's will. Gabriel retreated to the aisle outside the clock tower's engine room. He opened his hands and let his body naturally fall from the top of the clock tower. When his body was halfway down, 6 pairs of bright and clean wings suddenly opened, leading Gabriel to a certain direction in the suburbs of the city. Father said there was a small monastery there. What was that saying again? It was impossible for the bad guys to defeat the students in the school map, because the students with strong fighting skills could crush all the villains with the absolute map advantage. But Caroline didn't think she was a villain. In the teaching building with a complicated terrain, Caroline was hiding in a classroom, curling up her body in horror. However, at this moment, the light in the corridor outside suddenly lit up. Caroline! Come out! Haley's beast-like roar came from outside, along with the loud noises when he kicked every door along the way. I know you're here. Come out. Caroline had to cover her ears. Bang! Haley kicked open another door and broke into the classroom. He frantically swept everything in the classroom, the tables, chairs, and podium that his eyes could see. The sound of destruction was so close. Caroline shrank her neck in horror because Haley was in the classroom opposite her. Would he break the door in the next moment? Caroline hurriedly took out the stun baton from her underwear from her collar and held it in her trembling hand. However, at this moment the outside suddenly quieted down. No, it should be said that after one sentence, the outside suddenly quieted down. Have you had enough? Have you had enough? Hearing this sentence, Haley slowly turned around and saw Arnaud and Boston standing outside the door. The moment he saw Arnaud, Haley's face turned pale, and he tightly grasped the handle of the knife in his hand. At this moment, Arnold walked in quickly, took off his glasses with one hand, and kicked Haley in the abdomen, kicking him to the ground. Boston rolled his eyes. He still couldn't figure out why Arnaud was like a nightmare to Haley. No matter how manic he would be scared by Arnaud's cold eyes. But Haley suddenly got up. This time, the knife in Haley's hand suddenly slashed at Arnold's arm, leaving a wound. To Boston's surprise, Haley actually dared to attack Arnold this time. You stabbed me with a knife? Arnaud looked at the wound on his arm with blood dripping down. He suddenly raised his head and looked at Haley. You want to kill me? The knife fell from Haley's hand. He trembled and took 2 steps back. I didn't. I was just careless. Arnaud stepped in front of Haley and slapped his face. You want to kill me? I didn't. Arnaud slapped him again. You want to kill me? I didn't. I really didn't. I didn't. Arnaud didn't stop. He approached Haley step by step and slapped him again and again. Finally, he forced Haley to the wall and had nowhere to retreat. Arnaud grabbed Haley's collar. Have you forgotten who released you from the cage? Have you forgotten who gave you food? Have you forgotten who let you see the light of day again? You freak. I'm not a freak. I'm not. Haley grabbed Arnaud's hand tightly. Don't call me a freak. You've been a freak since you were young. Arnaud pressed Haley's head tightly. You were born one. You've been a freak since you were young. Have you forgotten how you tortured and killed your neighbor's cat when you were young? Have you forgotten what happened when you were 10 years old? Let me remind you. You sneaked into your neighbor's house at night. You supported Mrs. AMU until she fell asleep. Then, you used a kitchen knife to slit her throat and killed her. I didn't. You did. Arnaud grabbed Haley's head and slammed him against the wall. Not only did you kill her, you also used a knife to cut her flesh piece by piece. You were laughing, laughing happily. You freak. I didn't. You killed father. You killed mother. You freak. You killed everyone. Arnaud pressed Haley's head with both hands and slammed his forehead against Haley's. And now you want to kill me. You freak. I didn't. I really didn't. Haley lowered his head. I couldn't control myself. I don't know why. I just couldn't control myself. Caroline is mine, mine. She is good to me, she is mine. No one will be good to you. Arnaud grabbed Haley's head and slammed him against the wall again. The slamming caused Haley to see stars and his head to explode. Haley sat up limply against the wall. Only then did Arnaud let go of Haley. He looked at the wound on his arm and tore off his shirt, wrapping it around his arm. He squatted down and gently hugged Haley's head. He whispered, Listen, I'm the only one who will be good to you. I'm the only one who won't put you in a cage. I'm the only one who will erase your sins. Only I, no matter how many people you kill, only I will forgive you. 1 Caroline, even 10 Caroline cannot compare to me. Listen, you are mine, you are my other half. Listen well. Haley's eyes were absent-minded. He let Arnaud hug him and seemed to have calmed down. Seeing this, Poston couldn't help but frown. This was different from what he thought. He suddenly narrowed his eyes and glanced at the empty corridor. He suddenly took out the pistol hidden in his belt. Seeing this scene, Caroline in the classroom suddenly covered her mouth, fearing that she would make any sound. What did she see? Poston wanted to kill Arnaud and Haley behind? In the next second, would they hear gunshots? Caroline shrank her body in horror. 1 second passed, 2 seconds passed, 3 seconds passed. Bang! All of a sudden. But it wasn't the sound of a gunshot, but the sound of someone breaking in. Caroline only felt that her head was pushed by a hard object. Caroline's body suddenly stiffened and she slowly raised her head. She saw a black muzzle pointing at her. It was Poston. "Hey girl, I knew you were hiding here to watch the show." Caroline suddenly opened the stun baton and wanted to electrocute Poston, but Poston kicked her away 1 step ahead. Poston pinched Caroline's neck and stabbed the pistol directly into her mouth. The hard spearhead stirred Caroline's mouth. "Be quiet, you don't want me to open a hole in your body now, right?" Poston sneered. Caroline didn't dare to move. She breathed rapidly and her heart beat wildly. Death was so close that her mind was almost blank due to fear. "Hey boss, I found this woman," Poston shouted outside at this time. Arnaud let go of Haley at this time. Haley was sitting against the wall with his head lowered like an empty shell. Arnaud walked over and glanced at Caroline, who didn't dare to move as Poston pointed the pistol at her. "When did you find her?" Arnaud glanced around and looked at the bag beside Caroline. "Don't kill me, don't kill me," Caroline cried out in horror. "I can give you all, I can give you all. Please don't kill me. I'll give you all the money. I'll give you the bank card. Don't kill me." Arnaud picked up the bag on the ground, reached out and patted the dust on the bag, and put it on the table. "Actually, I really don't like to use this kind of violent method. You see, I'm bleeding. I'm starting to hate you." Arnaud opened the bag. In addition to some packaged food, there were some odds and ends. Not to mention small sealed bags. Light blue powder. What an insatiable woman. Arnaud walked toward Caroline and waved his hand. Poston understood and pressed Caroline directly on the table. Under the light, Arnold walked in front of Caroline, pinched her chin, and lowered his body. "I'm bleeding. You almost let him kill me. It's too easy for you to kill you like this. I suddenly have a very good idea. It's temporary." Caroline struggled desperately, but Arnaud took out the powder and covered Caroline's mouth in handfuls. "Boss, isn't this too wasteful?" Poston couldn't help but ask. "Then what do you want?" Arnaud said coldly. "Do you want to use bullets or rope? Then throw her body by the river? Use this to let her die and leave her body here. When the police find it tomorrow, they'll investigate. This kind of thing can't be covered up, and society will pay attention. After all, it happened on campus. Those politicians can't protect it no matter what. Those big shots in the market who have bath salts will be targeted. After they're all cleaned up by the police, there will be plenty of space for us to develop. But we can't sell it like this. Without money, how can we develop?" Poston frowned. Arnaud looked at the struggling Caroline and sneered. "Money? There's money here. And it's something you can't imagine. Oh, it's already working." After continuously feeding her bath salts, Caroline's face suddenly turned ugly. Her eyes began to roll back, and her whole body began to twitch crazily. She fell to the ground and blood began to flow from her nostrils. "Start packing," Arnaud ordered at this time. Poston hesitated for a moment and finally chose to do as he was told. He suddenly felt that it was a very promising thing to be able to swallow up the territory of those big shots. "Arnaud, maybe it's still useful to keep it." He walked to Haley's side and helped him up. Arnaud quickly wiped away the blood stains on the ground when he was injured, then restored the classroom to its original state and closed the door. He glanced at Caroline and found the bank card on her body. He quickly said, "Let's go, the patrolling people should have heard the commotion. Save me." Before leaving, Caroline struggled to hold on to Haley's calf. This might be the last bit of strength she could muster to survive. Haley's body trembled. He lowered his head and looked at Caroline's pleading face. His face was pale, but he was still carried away by Poston. Save, save, she could only see the pace they took as they left. Caroline felt as if her brain was about to explode. Her whole body was burning like a raging flame, and the surging blood vessels under her skin bulged. When this extreme pain reached a certain limit, Caroline suddenly opened her eyes. Her pupils had disappeared and turned completely white. A strange force was holding up her body at this time. A ribbon-like light suddenly spread out from her eyes, ears, mouth, and nose. Ah dash! She let out an extremely shrill scream. In the corridor, pieces of classroom glass began to burst. A huge impact centered on her was released in an instant toward the corridor. What's this? Arnaud, who first turned his head, saw this strange scene. Before his brain could even think, the huge impact overturned his body and knocked him to the end of the corridor. The huge pressure pressed him against the wall, and his face was even distorted because of it. What kind of monster is this? Poston was next. At this time, his body was pressed against the wall, and he let out a scream of horror. Caroline suddenly opened her mouth at this time. Like a scream, but also like a roar, the loud bang brought about the explosion of the entire floor. Countless fragments shot out from the window on the other side. Arnaud and the other two were instantly pressed under the rubble. It was unknown whether they were dead or alive. In the corridor that looked like a ruin, smoke and dust billowed. Caroline had already fallen to the ground, hugging her head tightly. Countless voices, countless images, and countless information began to crazily pour into her brain. She felt that she was going to be annihilated in this huge amount of foreign information. Amidst the countless chaotic sounds, Caroline heard a crisp, knocking sound. She opened her eyes with difficulty and finally saw something. Wearing a black and white maid costume, the woman she had seen in the mysterious shop. Save me," Caroline said weakly. "Why should I save you? As long as you endure the pain now, you will get extraordinary power. The dimensional observer will be able to leave your figure in the past or the future." "Ah, I can't take it. I can't take it. I don't want to. I don't want to." Caroline suddenly grabbed the woman's leg. "I don't want to. Think about it again. I'm not lying to you." She slowly squatted down, reached out, and touched Caroline's lips. She said indifferently, "You are stupid, ignorant, and vulgar, but because of this, you can get a chance to transform. Furthermore, there is no doubt that as long as you can endure this pain, you will become a life that surpasses humans." "Ah, I don't want to." Caroline grabbed her face in pain, scratching her cheeks, leaving bloody marks. "I don't want to. I don't want to. I don't want to." She stood up and said indifferently, "The dimensional observer is a sin bloodline that is not allowed to exist in a world. Only by permanently depriving you of the ability to reproduce can the Lord appear and allow you to have the opportunity to awaken. After you get through this pain, you will realize that the pain you are enduring now is not worth mentioning." "I don't want to. I can't take it anymore." "Then make your choice," she said indifferently. "Do you want to deprive yourself of this power, or do you want to accept this power and become an extraordinary?" "I don't want to. Don't save me. I beg you." She shook her head and seemed to sigh. "For countless years, for thousands of centuries, do you know why the dimensional observer's ability can't be awakened? That's because, only when it appears in a person with no tolerance will the chance of it being born appear so weak or even impossible. You are not the first to give up. Are you really not going to reconsider?" "I don't want to." Chapter 863. Everything about you will return to its original track. As if being pulled by something, Caroline felt as if there was a strange suction force in her body, sucking her from the outside into the body. She woke up all of a sudden, but she found that she was not in the corridor of the education building. It was dim here, and there was the sound of the projector playing. She had been here before. This was the screening room in the school that 403 brought her to. Caroline began to check her body. There was no injury. But she clearly remembered what happened before she fainted. Did everything return to its original track? Are you awake? The door of the screening room opened, and the person who walked in was the 403 that Caroline knew. At this time, 403 didn't wear the cheap human skin hood. The appearance of bandages still made Caroline feel a chill no matter how many times she saw it. Why am I here? Caroline asked subconsciously. 403 said, "You fainted in the corridor, so I moved you to this place." Corridor. Caroline closed her eyes and shook her head hard. The scene of the entire floor being destroyed was vivid in her mind. Corridor. What happened to that floor? What do you mean, what happened? 403 looked at Caroline curiously. Nothing. I just moved you back. By the way, I also moved them back. Caroline was startled. Suddenly, she seemed to think of something. She quickly walked to the window of the projector and looked outside. On the stage below, a huge cage was placed there. In the cage, there were a few people. Arnold, Haley, and Postai. They seemed to have fainted. Caroline suddenly looked back at 403. She didn't know what he wanted to do next, but she felt that his gaze was not human at all. You want to kill them? Caroline looked at 403 and asked. 403 shook his head. I just want them to feel fear and despair, and something more painful than death. At this time, 403 reached out and brushed past Caroline's cheek. This action and some words startled Caroline, but she saw that 403 didn't want to grab her. He just wanted to open the button on the wall behind her. The button for the lights on the stage below. Pa. The lights were turned on one by one, and the spotlights began to converge on the huge cage on the stage, shining on Arnold and the other two. At this time, 403 moved the projector over, then took a plate and put it into the projector. He started it up, and the old-fashioned projector began to turn slowly. One by one, the films moved under Caroline's eyes. Caroline began to hear some sounds. She looked at the stage curtain. The yellowed picture quality seemed to be quite old. It looked like a documentary. A woman was holding a child. The child was about 5 or 6 years old. The woman's face was full of smiles as she looked at the camera. She held the child's hand and waved it at the camera. When Caroline saw the house in the background, she felt a little familiar. Then she suddenly remembered that this was the house she had followed Arnaud to in the beginning, the old house where Arnaud was born and grew up. Hey, Haley, look at the camera. Look at Daddy. The woman loved the child so much that she kissed him on the cheek. Little Haley, say hello to your brother. Caroline realized that this film should be a family-oriented documentary, and the person holding the camera was probably the woman's husband. The camera began to turn, and another child entered the camera. The two children looked almost the same, almost indistinguishable except for their clothes. This is them when they were young. Caroline subconsciously looked at 403. 403 was watching the film at this time, saying indifferently, "Look at them, so small, just like angels, don't you think so?" At this time, little Haley, who was being held by the woman, suddenly turned his face and kissed the woman's cheek, making her laugh happily. "Look at you, Haley. You're just like a little gentleman. You're so obedient. Mommy really likes you. This is my son. Of course, my little Arnaud is also very good. I'm satisfied with the two of you." The documentary was still playing, followed by some family games. Even an outsider like Caroline could feel the warmth of this family. She suddenly remembered her childhood. Before her father was killed by a stray bullet in a gang fight, the family of 3 seemed to be like this. Why are you showing me this? Caroline frowned. No, I'm not showing it to you. 403 shook his head, then pointed at the cage on the stage. It's for them. I'm just adjusting the picture so that it can have the best angle. Why do you have these things? Caroline asked subconsciously. It's easy to find these things, right? 403 said indifferently. It depends on whether you have the heart to find it, whether you want to find it, and whether you want to do it. 403 began to rewind at this time, then slowly said, "My original plan was not like this, but something seems to have happened. This Haley actually came out early, so I didn't have time to show him some things. But it doesn't matter. Because maybe it's better to see these things. Of course, my mood will be a lot worse. But compared to the next, it doesn't seem to be important. Because I can't control myself, this is not a good thing." With that, 403 suddenly pushed the button of the sound system, making the sound equipment around the stage become extremely harsh. Caroline had to directly cover her ears. At the same time, affected by the harsh sound, Arnaud and the other two in the cage slowly woke up. Boston was the first to wake up. When he found that he was locked in the cage, he quickly stood up and subconsciously reached for his waist, but when he found that his pistol was gone, he suddenly broke out in a cold sweat. Who is here? Who is it?" Boston grabbed the iron bars of the cage and roared angrily. "Stop arguing. I have a headache." At this moment, Arnaud patted his head and stood up with the help of his own hands. He began to look around the surroundings. Haley sat up, his eyes dull, but he kept looking at the cage where he was trapped. No one knew what he was thinking. At this time, from the projection room above the seat, a light suddenly shone. The light and shadow penetrated Arnaud's body and then projected on the curtain behind him. A voice came with it. "Hey, little Haley, look at the camera, look at Daddy." Hearing this voice, Arnaud opened his eyes and quickly turned around. "Little Haley, say hello to your brother." On the curtain, the young Haley waved his hand at this time, and his eyes seemed to be infinitely enlarged. Because of the clumsy shooting technique, the child's face was all that was on the screen. Arnaud suddenly fell backward, his body bumping into the cage. His breathing quickened. He subconsciously averted his gaze, and subconsciously looked at Haley, who was also looking up at the movie on the screen. At this time, Haley also slowly turned his head and looked at Arnaud. The eyes of the two brothers suddenly met, and Arnaud suddenly wanted to take a step to the side. "Let me out!" At this moment, Haley suddenly sprung up and reached for Arnaud's neck with both hands, roaring like a beast. He even opened his mouth and bit Arnaud's ear. "Ah!" Arnaud let out a shrill cry, and his left ear was bitten off by Haley. He fell to the ground in pain. Haley's mouth was full of blood, and the fresh ear was still in his mouth, looking like a terrifying devil. This monster. Seeing this scene, Boston turned pale with fright. At this moment, Haley suddenly stared at Boston. Under great fear, Boston's ruthless personality was instantly provoked, and he suddenly flew towards Haley. "Freak! Go to hell! Don't call me a monster!" A normal person, even a normal person with anger and fear, would not be able to fight against a crazy person. At this moment, Haley's face was stained with blood, as if he didn't know pain and had strength beyond ordinary people. Poston used his well-trained fists to hit Haley's face again and again. He almost broke Haley's nose and blew up his lips, but he was unable to hit Haley. Haley suddenly seized an opportunity and directly bit Boston's throat. Poochie, the artery on his neck was bitten, and a terrifying amount of blood suddenly splashed out. Caroline couldn't watch this bloody scene anymore, and her body trembled with fright. She looked at 403's appearance in horror, but she saw the joy in 403's eyes that couldn't be concealed. He had taken out a bag of beef from somewhere and was eating it with relish. Caroline looked at him and even smiled. "Oh, do you want to eat some?" Smelling the beef, Caroline suddenly had a feeling of nausea. She quietly leaned against the wall, trying to walk toward the door of the screening room. "The stage play hasn't ended yet. Are you leaving?" 403 didn't look back at this time. "Finish watching it. I said that after this matter is over, I will prove your innocence. Don't give me a reason to treat you badly." Caroline nodded nervously and stopped her footstep. But she didn't dare to look at what happened on the stage. She could only hear Haley's voice clearly, and maybe Arnold's voice. Boston might be dead. In that case, Caroline didn't think Boston could survive. Why don't you appear in front of them? Caroline suddenly asked. This was a question she couldn't understand. She didn't understand why she asked such a question. Fear comes from the unknown. 403 said indifferently, Don't let them know why they are trapped in the cage, don't let them know who is behind this. The unknown will make Arnold lose his pride. When everything is out of his control, he will become helpless, even ignorant, and the abyss of fear will swallow him. You seem to know him very well. Caroline looked at 403, and there was a name in her heart that she wanted to blurt out, Lucas. But she didn't say this name. She didn't try to provoke the other party, nor did she try to explore the other party's origin. It was almost the most important principle for a prostitute to survive. Who are you? Let go! Let go! You freak! Let go! I let you out! Let go! Monster! You freak! Let me go, let me go, let. It was Arnold's roar. There was unconcealable fear in his anger. Even though she was so far away and couldn't see his appearance at this time, every cell in Caroline's body seemed to be able to feel the fear that belonged to Arnold at this moment. Everything was as 403 had said. Caroline began to cover her ears, curling up in the corner, not daring to listen to the voices of the two brothers on the stage at this moment. Caroline didn't know when it started, but she seemed to be unable to hear Arnold's voice, and even Haley's voice. At this moment, there was only the sound of the family film played by the projector outside. Their mother's voice. Hey, little Haley, look at the camera, look at Daddy. Look at you, little Haley, you're just like a little gentleman. You're so obedient. Mommy really likes you so much. Time passed by little. When Caroline released her hands from her ears, she found that 403 seemed to be crying at this time, looking out of the playback window in a daze. Maybe he was looking at the film on the screen, or maybe he was looking at everything on the stage, but Caroline wanted to forget everything on the stage. Let's go, don't miss the past anymore. 403 suddenly walked in front of Caroline and reached out to her. He pulled Caroline up and said slowly, It's about to end. After that, Caroline watched 403 take out a few barrels of gasoline with her own eyes. He splashed the gasoline on the stage, drenching Boston, Arnold, and Haley. Haley was still alive, but Arnold had collapsed. Arnold fell with Caroline on his back, so she couldn't see what Arnold looked like at this moment. But she said in her heart, This is good. If you can't see, you don't have to think too much. She knew that she might be deceiving herself, but how many people could do it without deceiving themselves? It was just that Haley was still like a beast, stimulated to go crazy again. 403 didn't seem to see it. At this moment, in Caroline's opinion, he seemed to be unable to see anything. 403 finally set a fire. The raging flames began to burn the seats here, then spread to the screening room and the stage. 403 once again put on his inferior human skin mask and slowly walked out. Caroline suddenly had a feeling that this might be the last time she saw 403's bandaged appearance. It might even be the last time she saw this vengeful demon. But even if it was a demon, Caroline had to keep up with 403's pace. Not for anything else, but because there was only one way out. Dorm 403, I suggest you don't go there anymore. On the way, 403 suddenly said to Caroline, Come with me. I will give you what I promised you. Caroline followed 403 on campus. The night seemed to be unable to stop 403's pace. He easily avoided the crowd on the road, those who rushed over after discovering the fire. But Caroline knew that even if they rushed to the scene, they wouldn't be able to save anyone. She clearly remembered that when she left, Haley almost became a burning man. Perhaps there was nothing that could force the flames to burn evil. When the flames were extinguished, everything would turn into dust, leaving no trace. The place she followed 403 to was a pump room in the boys' dormitory area. After opening the door of the pump room, Caroline saw some food residue, paper sheets piled up into a large box, and some almost burned-out candles. You have been living in this place? It's good here. Do you think I should live in the bell tower? 403 sat on the ground casually, then looked for something in the large paper box. Why the bell tower? Caroline was puzzled. Notre Dame de Paris, the ugly man living in the bell tower. 403 seemed to have found what he was looking for. He stood up and looked at Caroline. Haven't you seen it? Then I suggest you take a look. Caroline shook her head. 403 didn't say anything, but he handed something in his hand to Caroline. It was a USB flash drive. He said, "It contains the process of Haley killing Livia. It can prove your innocence." Caroline held the USB flash drive tightly in her hand and said incredulously, You have been monitoring me? It doesn't matter." 403 shook his head. He sniffed his clothes. Perhaps it was because he was stained with a lot of gasoline, the smell was very strong. 403 began to take off his clothes. He planned to change his clothes, but he found that Caroline was still unwilling to leave at this time, so he stopped. "Let's go. The things inside are not fake, and it's not something I can send you away casually. Moreover, we will never see each other again. Even if you see me, you won't know who I am." Caroline hesitated for a moment. 403 had taken off his shirt and found a new one. Seeing Caroline's expression, he took out a camcorder from the large cardboard box. "Don't believe me? If you don't believe me, you can watch it here." Caroline nodded and took the camcorder. She inserted the USB flash drive and began to watch it. She glanced at 403. It seemed that in addition to the wounds on his face, there were few wounds on his body, except for one. There was a strip scar on his chest. It seemed that he was stabbed by something. At this moment, a scream suddenly came from the video. It was Livia's scream. The angle of the video was probably from the corner of the wall. It should be secretly installed. When she saw Haley's ferocious appearance, Caroline almost closed her eyes. She couldn't bear to see the scene of Livia being killed. She abruptly turned off the video. However, 403 had disappeared. The door of the pump room was open. He had left. It took a long time to extinguish the fire on campus. It was already dawn, but the fire trucks had not left yet. Many students began to rush to the scene of the fire and took out their mobile phones. Probably soon, the campus intranet would be full of discussions about this fire. "I heard that 3 bodies were found." Well, I saw it. When they were carried out, they had been burned to ashes. They couldn't be identified at all. "If you want to investigate, you can still find it, right? God knows how long we have to wait. By then, the murderer may be at large." Listening to the students' voices, Caroline lowered her head and left the place. She was worried, so she went back to take a look, but for the time being, it seemed to be safe. However, the number of students who rushed to the scene gradually increased. Caroline walked with her head down in the crowd, but she suddenly saw a woman. Holding a book, she should be preparing to go to class. She just looked at the crowd from a distance, at the small auditorium that was burned by the fire. This woman. It was Lucas' girlfriend, the woman in the photo found in the closet. Caroline hesitated for a moment, but finally walked over. She pretended to be relaxed and asked the woman, "Hey! You are?" The girl looked at Caroline suspiciously. "It's nothing. I just wanted to ask if you know what happened here." Caroline smiled. The girl shook her head and didn't care about others hitting on her. "I just came here. I don't know what happened. I have to rush to class. Why don't you ask others?" With that, she said goodbye and turned to leave. Caroline suddenly patted the girl on the shoulder and stopped her. "Hey, what's your name? I seem to have seen you somewhere." "Oh, is that so?" The girl looked at Caroline in surprise. Maybe it's somewhere. The school is not big. Maybe you have seen me. Let me think about it." Caroline seemed to be thinking seriously. Oh, I remember. You have your boyfriend. I have seen him before. I know your boyfriend. He seems to be called Lucas, right? Are you a friend of Lucas? The girl frowned. Caroline shrugged and said, No, I just know his name. I haven't seen him many times. Speaking of which, I haven't seen him for a long time. How is he recently? The girl shook her head and said, Then you should ask his mentor. He should be interning in a pharmaceutical company now. He hasn't been back to school for more than 2 months. Also, we broke up long ago. Pharmaceutical company? Caroline was stunned and said subconsciously, How is that possible? Shouldn't he be dead? I mean missing? Okay. The girl looked at Caroline. Listen, I don't know who you are or what your relationship with Lucas is. But I can tell you very clearly that Lucas and I are over. Please tell him not to harass me with these little tricks anymore. And don't send me flowers anymore. He sent you flowers? Last week, outside the classroom during class. My God, he was dressed like a turkey. It was so ugly. He was simply looking for trouble. The girl shook her head. Sorry, I have to go to class. Wait. Looking at the back of the girl who left quickly. Caroline was stunned on the spot. If 403 was not Lucas, who could he be? Caroline suddenly felt a headache. A picture flashed in her mind. It was what she had seen before. Arnold was stabbed with a knife in the forest. The scene of struggling in the water. Caroline closed her eyes, but she suddenly opened them. She suddenly remembered the long wound on 403's body. Who the hell are you? Suddenly, Caroline felt that it didn't matter who 403 was. What mattered was that she seemed to have escaped from this troublesome vortex. Caroline left the university with some light footstep. Outside the school gate, Caroline wanted to find a taxi, but when she touched her clothes, she found that she didn't have a single coin on her. She couldn't help but smile bitterly. She always felt that she had never been so poor, but it didn't seem to be particularly uncomfortable. Caroline took a deep breath, but she felt that there seemed to be something in her trouser pocket. She took it out and took a look. It turned out to be that kind of bank card. She found a cash withdrawal machine nearby and looked at the balance on it. Caroline found that the money in it was not reduced at all. After Arnold got this card, he didn't seem to have touched it. In a trance, Caroline called a taxi. When the driver asked her where she was going, Caroline hesitated for a while before saying softly, "Go to the hospital." In front of the ward, Caroline hesitated for a moment and finally pushed the door open. But she didn't see Nia here, the sickly woman. The bed was so clean as if no one had slept on it. Caroline felt puzzled and stopped a nurse in the corridor and asked, "Where is the woman who lives here? Why is Nia missing? She might have that kind of worst result." "Oh? You mean her? She was discharged 2 days ago," the nurse said casually. Discharged? Caroline felt incredulous. How could she be discharged? Wasn't she about to die and waiting for the operation to save her life? Did she give up? Who said that? The nurse shook her head and said, "She had the operation a long time ago, and it was quite successful, right?" "Impossible, she looks so weak that you can only see the bones." "Which patient is not weak after a major operation?" The nurse shrugged, then pushed the card away from Caroline. "Is there anything else? I'm going to send something away." Caroline shook her head subconsciously. At this time, she felt someone gently patting her shoulder. It was a man in a suit, dressed very formally. He looked at Caroline and asked politely, "Excuse me, are you Miss Caroline?" "Yes." "Who are you?" Caroline subconsciously became alert. The man quickly said, "Don't get me wrong, I have no malice toward you, Miss Caroline. I've been waiting for you here since early this morning. Southern Cross, do you remember? What the hell is going on? I think we can find a quiet place to talk about you being deceived." The man smiled slightly. "Is the coffee room downstairs okay? This is not the place to talk about things." Southern Cross. Caroline suddenly remembered the business card Mr. Orphy gave her. She thought that after the phone call, the other party just casually brushed her off. According to your request, our people will soon start to deal with your matter. Regarding Livia's murder case, we've found some suspicious points from various sources, which should prove that you're innocent. Of course, if you want to deal with this matter faster, we can do it without going through the judicial process. It's up to you. Caroline was shocked to hear this. The man continued, however, when we were investigating your personal information, we also discovered something else. That is, we found that you owe a huge sum of money, Miss Caroline. It's a recent debt. The other party is a loan shark. Impossible. I haven't borrowed money recently. I think you have an impression of these two people. The man took out 2 photos from the document bag in his hand. The people in the photos were Mr. Carlo and Nia, but Nia's photo was before she fell ill. Our people have already detained these 2 people. We've also gotten the information from lawyer Carlo. The man said confidently, "This person is a liar. He is not a lawyer, but he knows the law very well. He has a criminal record before. And this woman is his girlfriend. The documents you signed are not a commission agreement for the purchase and sale of real estate, but a contract to borrow money from the people in your name. The amount is not small. This is their confession. You can take a look." Caroline looked at the information given by the other party. After a long time, she gritted her teeth and said, "These 2 bastards. In addition, when I caught Carlo and Nia, I also caught a guy by the way. After asking, he seemed to be a subordinate of a man named Boston. Oh, so many of them. We also found the fugitive who shot and ran away during the memorial service at the theater last time, which solved a lot of problems. What's wrong with this world? It felt so unreal." Caroline didn't know how she walked out of the hospital gate. She didn't even remember what kind of mood she had when she came here after escaping from that troublesome whirlpool. She had the idea of using the money in her bank card to treat Nia. Whether it was compensation or something else, Caroline herself couldn't tell. However, what made her feel ridiculous was that whether it was Nia, Haliano, or 403, she had been in a world of lies and traps during this period of time. Looking at the busy road, Caroline suddenly smiled. At this time, she really understood the real intention of Nia calling her to say those words that day. "Caroline, you are a stupid woman," she said to herself. On the street, Caroline suddenly didn't know where she was going. She suddenly lost all her goals, and there was only the unimaginable wealth in her arms. An unfamiliar young man walked to Caroline at this time, pulled her to a flyer, and said enthusiastically, "Miss, are you interested in learning about our organization? We can help you get a formal degree in all major universities." Caroline suddenly froze. She held the flyer and looked at it for a while, then suddenly asked, "Can it make people smarter?" "Miss, knowledge can increase people's wisdom." The young man had a bright smile. "Maybe, we can learn more about it in detail. Well, what is your current education?" "I haven't studied since I was young." Caroline shook her head. It doesn't matter. We still have a lot of courses here." The young man said again, "Then, do you have any courses that you are particularly interested in? For example, what major?" "I don't understand." Caroline still shook her head. This is a bit difficult." The young man was a little embarrassed. But Caroline smiled slightly at this time. "But, I have money, I am very rich. I don't think this is a problem. Miss, please come with me, I will tailor the most suitable course for you." He pulled Caroline inside. Caroline took a deep breath. She didn't know why she suddenly made such a decision, but it felt good. When she entered the door, Caroline suddenly turned around as if she felt that someone was looking at her from behind. But when she looked across the road, she didn't seem to see anything, or rather, she just saw a back. Everything about you will return to its original track. In front of the club's door on the basement 3 floors. Even if she had most of the authority to buy and sell, she still couldn't walk through the door. This was a place only the shop owner was allowed to enter. but Miss Maid knew very well what was inside. It was an altar used to sacrifice everything. In front of the door, Miss Maid slowly held something in her hands. It was a dazzling ball of light.